Attorney General Andrea Campbell is here for September's Ask the AG. We'll ask her about combating
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. In Lebanon, scores of Hezbollah fighters and members have been injured after their pagers exploded today. It appears to be a widespread attack on part of the militant group's communications system. No one has yet claimed responsibility. NPR's Jana Raff has details.
Lebanon's public health ministry directed hospitals across the country to prepare for mass casualties and warned anyone with a pager to immediately throw it away. It called for all health workers to report for duty, for people to donate blood, and for all citizens with similar devices to not use them until, quote, the situation is fully understood. Ambulances and civilian vehicles streamed into hospitals in Beirut and other cities carrying the wounded. The blasts were focused in Beirut's southern suburbs, where Hezbollah has offices, and in the south of the country, where the group has been trading cross-border attacks with Israel since the start of the war in Gaza last year. Jana Raff, NPR News, Amman.
Federal authorities are filing 2 felony gun charges against the man accused in the apparent attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump. The incident occurred at Trump's Florida golf course. He was not hurt. The acting Secret Service director says no shots were fired toward Trump. This morning, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says his state will open an investigation into the suspect, Ryan Ruth. DeSantis says he wants the suspect prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
I think this is an offense that should merit a life in prison. And if we're not going to go to the fullest extent of the law, you're lowering the threshold at which someone in the future may try to do something like this.
Authorities say the suspect may have been in the bushes near the golf course for as long as 12 hours before the incident happened. Former President Trump is set to hold a town hall meeting in Flint, Michigan tonight. This is part of a blitz by both the Trump and Harris campaigns through Michigan and in unusually small settings. From member station WDET in Detroit, Quinn Kleinfelter reports.
Trump's town hall, moderated by his former press secretary, Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders, will focus on how to, quote, make America affordable again. It comes only days after another apparent assassination attempt against the former president. It's a change from Trump's typically raucous rallies, a move his Democratic rival is also adopting this week. Vice President Kamala Harris visits Metro Detroit Thursday for a live-streamed event billed as an intimate conversation with Oprah Winfrey. In a statement, Winfrey says she hopes to motivate voters to make a plan to get to the polls for themselves, their friends, and their families. For NPR News, I'm Quinn Kleinfelter in Detroit.
Stocks are higher on Wall Street. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up more than 150 points. This is NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. The New Hampshire Libertarian Party is defending its right to call for the assassination of a, quote, tyrannical president. Over the weekend, as Josh Rogers reports for the New England News Collaborative, the party's statement comes after it shared and then deleted a post on X endorsing the assassination of Vice President Kamala Harris.
In a statement Monday, the state Libertarian Party said, quote, we would never advocate for the assassination of a tyrannical president. That's illegal. We were merely acknowledging how some members would react to one. It went on to argue that if you celebrate the U.S. War for Independence or the assassination of, quote, past tyrants like Abraham Lincoln, you believe that violence is sometimes necessary to advance or protect freedom. The party's now deleted post on X, which said anyone who murdered Kamala Harris would be a, quote, American hero, has been condemned by politicians locally and nationally across the political spectrum. State police, the FBI, and Secret Service are all aware of the posts, which were made shortly before authorities arrested a man in Florida for an assassination attempt against former President Donald Trump. For the New England News Collaborative, I'm Josh Rogers.
Beginning 2025, almost all Amazon workers will be required to be in the office 5 days a week. In a company memo and blog post yesterday, Amazon CEO Andy Jassy wrote that company officials have decided to return to being in the office the way they were before the onset of COVID. He added that when they look back over the last 5 years, they continue to believe that the advantages of being together in the office are significant. 73 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the law firm Cooley LLP, With offices in the U.S., Europe, and Asia, Cooley advises entrepreneurs, investors, financial institutions, and established companies around the world where innovation meets the law.
Rowdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. Good morning, Jim.
How are you?
We're all clapping here
Yeah.
at the podium. Okay, before we get started,
I like that we let our own clap.
That's right. I thought you got to make
what's
sure.
sad is that nobody joined you. That's what's really sad,
Well,
Attorney
you figure
General.
I'm closest to the microphone, so it would sound like a big enthusiastic clap. You know what I mean? Anyway, before we get started, we want to remind listeners of our text segment later in the show. Today's prompt: can you explain crypto to us? Former President Trump's latest money-grabbing scheme, his core family business, is now decentralized finance, a.k.a. crypto. But we are a little suspicious. Do you think that the former president has any idea what crypto actually is? You can weigh in on that, and maybe you can explain what crypto is to everybody else, including the former president. I'm sure he's tuning in. Anyway, you can text us at 877-301-8970 and help everyone understand all about crypto.
Thank you, but right now, more pressing matters. We're joined by Attorney General of the Commonwealth, Andrea Campbell. She's here for the hour, taking our questions, yours. You can reach Andrea Joy Campbell at 877-301-8970. That's phone or text. And if you're here at the library, you can find our colleague Hannah. That would be right over there. If you have a question, talk to Hannah about it, and you might be able to address the Attorney General directly. Attorney General Campbell, it's great to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Glad
being
to
here.
be here. Thank
Great
you.
to see you, Attorney General. So let's start with a very upbeat story, actually. I read this on CNN, saw a lot of the pictures. I did not realize that Kamala Harris had been a mentor to you and a lot of other black women coming into politics. You campaigned for her when you were 7 months pregnant out there in Iowa in 2020. Right. So tell us.
So I'm of course not only out here supporting her and Tim Walz to be the next president and vice president of this country, because what is at stake in this election. But personally, I'm also supporting her because I know she'd be an incredible president, an incredible leader. And I've seen this over the years. So it's sort of full circle, actually. So I'm obviously the first black woman Attorney General of Massachusetts, and I never take that for granted. It's an honor and privilege to serve and represent Massachusetts. But if you go backwards, when I graduated from UCLA Law School, she was my commencement speaker. And at that time, she was the first black woman elected as district attorney in San Francisco. And then, of course, went on to be the Attorney General. And there's only been 4 black women elected AGs
in the country?
Only 4.
Wow.
I didn't know that.
Only 4, and I'm the most recent, and Tish James before me, and Kamala before her, and Pamela from Indiana before her. And so it's a small group, obviously, but in addition to the mentorship, I consider our vice president to be a good friend, an advisor. I was just at an event last night in Concord, talking about what's at stake in this election, everything having to do with the rule of law, democracy, if you care about climate justice, gun violence prevention, if you want everything related to economics and affordability to actually be dealt with, and so much more, if you want a country that is coming together versus someone who's dividing us and calling for another candidate to be assassinated. That's what's at stake in this election. But I stress that she's good on the substance, she's good on the issues, but it's also about who you surround yourself with. And so some of this mentorship work that she has been doing around the country to make sure our political leadership reflects the demographics of people we serve also demonstrates how she'll show up as a leader. She's going to hire people that are compassionate and empathetic. She's going to hire people who know more than her, who are experts, hire people who are not yes folks or enablers, but push and challenge her to do the best on behalf of the constituents. And most importantly, don't enable her to do bad things that harm the constituents and the residents of this country. So I'm just excited to get out here. I'm just reminding folks, there are 49 days until this election. Some states, of course, start voting early. And yes, we're a blue state in Massachusetts, but you can phone bank to other states. You can travel to battleground states. You can mobilize folks. It's going to be important that everyone does their part to save our democracy, and most importantly, to elect leaders who care about folks and who will get things done while bringing us all together.
Can you give us an example of a moment with Vice President Harris that meant a lot to you?
Well, one, being in Iowa campaigning with her when I was 7 months pregnant with my second son was incredible because it was the Iowa caucus season. It was just the energy on the ground there, advocates and political operatives and those who run community-based organizations, do grassroots, get out the vote. They were all there, so you felt this groundswell of support. But this was also at a time when folks, I think, counted Kamala out. And I remember going to Iowa, it was all hands on deck to really push her candidacy and to push volunteers and to inspire them to continue to get out there on her behalf. And at this point, of course, everyone was running, including Biden, Senator Warren, and so many, Cory Booker, and so many others, Pete Buttigieg. And I remember her walking onto that stage, and she was the best that night. And I remember getting on the plane, 7 months pregnant, and looking, I will be very candid with you, looking at the media coverage and asking myself, was I in the same room, in the same space? And so later on, when she decided to drop out of the race, she called me, extended gratitude for my support from the beginning. I was the first elected, actually, in Massachusetts to endorse her as for president in 2020. She was extending gratitude, and I just remember her saying, she didn't know what was going to come next, but for me to keep fighting the fight, right, to keep pushing. And I remember thanking her for putting herself in the race, talking about the media coverage, and I thought she did an incredible job in Iowa, and to keep staying the course because her leadership was still needed. So those moments of encouragement happen. They're needed. To be a black woman elected is hard. It's harder to raise money. You still, of course, get threats of all different kinds that can come your direction. So there is a group of folks who support each other, and I feel incredibly blessed to have such a deep connection with an incredible human being who is for the people and about the people.
Have you gotten a lot of threats since you've been Attorney General?
Well, who knows, frankly, because I think...
you would know.
Well, no, and this, what I mean by that is I have a state police detail. That is a new reality. So things don't necessarily get to me and come to me as I go to various events where there are threats that may be happening or things going on. But who knows? I also don't, monitor the comments on media articles or on social media. I'm very faith-driven. I stay connected in my faith. I don't get distracted by the noise because I know I am protected by something bigger than me. And I just stay focused on the people and the work.
But have any threats been brought to your attention by the state police or others?
No, I think sometimes I think you can go to certain places and folks who may be disgruntled about something may be present there, but we treat everyone with respect and by the grace of God and, of course, the incredible detail I have, we've been fine.
Okay, in a minute, we're going to get to your calls and texts at 877-301-8970. The treasurer, Deb Goldberg, just fired the head of the Cannabis Control Commission, Shannon O'Brien. Months-long investigation. Fires are, at least as a member of the public, shared, it appears to me, very little information as to what was the motivation for her decision. You're her lawyer.
Yes.
And hers meaning Deb Goldberg. So I guess the questions are several. One, is this due process? Two, was the process fair? And three, am I not entitled, I and my fellow taxpayers, entitled to know more about why an appropriately appointed commissioner was fired when the rules for dismissing commissioners are, at least from my estimation, quite rigid and tight? So answer any and all, please, if you would.
I will. Before I get to the chair conversation, I think I want to just talk about the commission as a whole because it's been in the news quite a bit, and that's not lost on me. There is dysfunction in different ways, as described by folks who were there. I think there is a culture where some folks get along, some don't. And so we have actively, as one of the appointing authorities, working with the treasurer and the governor, we all share appointments, to work with the legislature. And I've said to the legislature, we have to come together, and we will, on ways to improve the commission so they can do their job. And that includes some possible structural changes. They need to hire more staff and hire more staff quickly. So we're getting more in the weeds on that, because if they do not figure that out, we're all in trouble. And obviously there is an appointment of an interim chair. So there's just the instability that exists. You cannot do job effectively. And everyone agrees they want to change that going forward. So we're actively involved in that. On the specifics related to the removal of the former chair, obviously the treasurer put out a public report that is, I think it's public. Oh, it's not.
Exactly my point.
Oh, okay. Well, it will be public at some point. I think I have to be
Do
careful.
you know that for a fact?
I have to be careful because this is where I get in trouble and my team is like, excuse me, you can only say so much. We don't know where this is going to go. Obviously, I've represented it in my capacity as AG, the treasurer, before. That has to continue. And so that's ongoing, and I can't say more than that. But when I can, I will. And when we can release that report, we will.
So,
And it is a lengthy one.
But don't you believe that we have a right now to know why a commissioner in a public position was fired? I don't understand what the delay is. It's not a low-level employee where you might keep their personnel records private. Aren't we entitled to know what the motivation was?
At some point. I mean, I think what we're figuring out in all of our investigations and representation of either a constitutional officer, obviously I've represented the Secretary of State and others, there is due process, there is discovery, there's layers of every case, and our government bureau does an incredible job. And so when we can share things publicly, we will. And I just will stress this. It is also one of the frustrations of my role too, right? I come from local government, city council, where I could share more freely. That's not the case when we are undergoing various investigations or affording folks due process. And there may be hiccups along the way and frustrations from the public vantage point, but when we can share it, we will. And we will make that clear when we can.
Well, here's one last thing about it. I think it's been, how long has it been now? 20 months or something incredibly?
It's been a long time.
Okay, 20. So Shannon O'Brien, first woman elected statewide in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, long distinguished career, has basically been hanging for 20 months, accused of gross misconduct. Nothing I read seems to be gross misconduct. I mean, maybe she said some things she shouldn't have said, but it doesn't seem to be gross misconduct. She's kind of been, her reputation has been, I think, grossly shattered in public opinion. Massachusetts, we are one of the most secretive states going. I mean, we can't know what the governor's doing, we can't know what the legislature's doing, we can't know what the judiciary's doing. I don't mean in every sense, but we're very secretive here, much worse than other states. Not only has your office represented her, but she's gone off Goldberg and paid another $800,000 to another, so that's a lot of taxpayer money
To
here.
another what? Other lawyers?
Another lawyers,
Yeah.
right. So I guess the thing is, how long should Shannon O'Brien have to hang in the wind being accused and getting fired for gross misconduct before the state gets its act together and says what the heck she did?
Well, I will say that I want to, in the representation of the treasurer, she has, I think, been very thoughtful here, and she can't obviously express everything publicly that she would want to at this stage because it is active and it is ongoing. And that thoughtfulness I've seen present, of course, representing her in her office. And there have been delays for different reasons that I can't even speak to publicly that have delayed this. And it's not just one person's fault as to why it's taken this long. And so this is ongoing. More will come out publicly. And I've always stressed that on the transparency, whether it's public records context, conflict of interest, whatever it is, we go above and beyond in terms of disclosures. We think that is important for all agencies and all parts of government. Crystal clear. The difference between an attorney general, though, versus other constitutional offices is we do have processes, legal rules, statutes, regulations, court procedures, you name it, that dictate how we can talk about things publicly and how we cannot. But I've always said when we reach a conclusion in something, we will absolutely share sooner than later, not only with media, but with constituents, especially about the things that they care about the most. And so that will happen here too.
Let's go to the calls, 877-301-8970. Dawn, you're in Southborough. You're on with the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell. Hi.
Hi. Good morning. Thank you, General Andrea and Attorney Campbell, for taking my call. My question is about something to do with more modern technology, and that is being hacked. And I have a situation where my phone and my email has been hacked, and I have an IP address that those hackings belong to. But I've taken it to my local police station, and they are not really that interested in investigating. And I'm just wondering, who is in charge of investigating this, and what can one do about it? It's very concerning. It's been going on for 2 years.
We got it, Dawn. Let's hear what the Attorney General has to say.
Thank you, Dawn, for calling it. Because yours is so specific in nature, if you could stay on, Kira from my team, and Raisa also here from our ISC team, our Information Services Division. So if you could stay on, because yours is so specific, and frankly, we'd want more details, that would be helpful. We do have a data privacy team. We have different parts of the office that address data breaches, et cetera. So it's robust work. So if we can be helpful, we want to be. And if we can't, we, of course, want to do a warm referral.
Dawn,
so if
don't
you
go.
can stay on,
I'm
Don,
sorry.
and thank you for calling in.
We'll get your contact information and share it with the Attorney General's colleagues. Dawn, thanks for the call.
You know, Attorney General, there was an awful story this summer about Southwick Regional High School where a mother said her daughter's first year in the 8th grade has been full of racial threats and bias and hate, and there's been a lot of reports about anti-Semitism in the schools. I know you're very concerned about that. So what's going on?
There's a lot going on, and I appreciate you actually naming Southwick, because as I crisscross the state to talk about, we're going to do everything in our office to, of course, keep people safe from violence. We are actively taking guns off the street every single day, and drugs, and addressing drug trafficking cases. So this public safety, public health work is ongoing. We're going to make sure you have access to good housing, and we're going to make sure your parks and your water is clean, and that you have the goods and things you would need to thrive. But at the end of the day, I've been stressing, who cares about all of that tangible stuff if you don't feel safe as a student in your school, and if you don't feel safe in your community just walking around being who you want to be, as my uncle says, and being free and to identify and represent yourself however you seem fit. So Southwick, I have been stressing as one place where, sadly, some black students did not feel safe. And there were things before what led up to the ultimate incident where they felt like the culture at the school did not warrant or create a safe school and safe and supportive school environment, which led also to a mock slave auction. So folks are usually in shock. This happened at a school where a group of students, using their fellow students, created a mock slave auction to auction off these other students. And I remember I talked to one of the students who is just amazing. Not only excelled and graduated on honors and went back to that school, but most importantly, talked about the detrimental effect on her and what that felt like, and the violation of her humanity and the trauma she's still dealing with and grappling with that she will have to overcome as she pursues her dreams. So we don't just talk about the problem, though, in the office. And I think it's important to name that that happens here in Massachusetts, this idea that we're progressive and we don't have racism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia here in Massachusetts. It's false. We do. But in our office, we also want to address and be a part of the solutions. And so I'm really proud of our Children's Justice Unit and our Civil Rights Division in particular. Our Children's Justice Unit is really on the ground every single day, working with school districts, including Southwick. Not only work with the school district, work with community-based organizations, including the NAACP and so many others who were involved, the parents, the students, in a very intimate way to push for the school district to not only go through some of our trainings that we host around bullying and harassment, which they have done, but to also put together a plan on ways in which to develop training and protocols to prevent this from happening in the future, and then pushing them in the response on how they respond to things before it reaches that point of a mock slave auction. And so that work continues. We've put out some information for our school districts and what they can do. We've put out information for our students, which is equally important, including working with those students who perpetuated this. You can't forget them. And we've also put out information for our parents, which is equally important, what our kids are learning at home. I stress this, I'm a mom of 2 boys, not just an AG. I have a 7-year-old and soon-to-be 5-year-old, who I absolutely love, Alexander and Aiden. And we are teaching them early on how to respect their classmates, how to respect people, how to love them. Our faith dictates that too, and we connect those dots for them. That is critically important. Kids carry things we know, and they learn quickly from us and how we model our language and how we model how we treat people and how we talk about folks. So if we're using words of stereotypes and bias, that's going to trickle down. So we also have training materials and materials for parents. And so I just have to give a shout out to the Children's Justice Unit in my office. You know I'm always giving shout outs to my team, I'm sorry.
I think that's
but
actually a good quality,
Liza and Casey and the whole team, they used to be a team of 1. Liza, and then she expanded this team, and they are doing significant work, responding in real time to complaints, and then, of course, going back to these districts to do meaningful work on the ground that we know will have an impact in changing school culture and climate so that everyone feels safe, regardless of the municipality you live in Massachusetts.
Thank you for that. Tom in Worcester, you're next with the Attorney General. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Tom. Hi, Tom.
Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
My question is about the large footprint that the University of Massachusetts Memorial Hospital has in central Massachusetts. Given the issues with Stewart Healthcare, there used to be about 6 hospitals in Worcester. Now they have merged or been given to UMass. I don't know if UMass is run by the state. I suspect that it is not. That is not clear to me. And I'd like to know from the Attorney General whether her office or any other entity she knows about is keeping an eye on this group.
We're keeping an eye on all institutions that do healthcare in Massachusetts. We usually respond when we get complaints from either patients or providers at these institutions, and we follow up on those. Sometimes they're individual complaints, and sometimes there are several folks talking about concern related to an institution and the quality of care. UMass Memorial is not rising to the top in terms of complaints. I would say, Tom, if you want to stay on, if there are specific things that are concerning to you that, of course, would take longer than this call, please do. Of course, first and foremost, we are actively and intimately involved in everything related to Stewart, which is a painful situation all around and has been for patients and providers for years. I often say I inherited this mess. And that accountability review to hold them accountable as a for-profit institution that put profits above residents is ongoing. It will be something that we have to come back to the public on, but I can't say any more than that. We obviously have inserted ourselves in the bankruptcy proceedings to ensure that the sales of some hospitals happened so that patient care can continue. And I stressed from the very beginning the hardship of the possibility of closures, which is very difficult and challenging. So I say, Tom, Stewart's at the top of the list, but if you have specific concerns about UMass Memorial and the quality of care, do let us know.
Tom, stay on hold if you choose to. Can we stay on Stewart for a second? We had 2 of the Spotlight reporters for the Globe the other day who added to the story that Brian McGrory and some reporters of the Globe have told about grotesque self-enrichment by Ralph Della Torre. At the same time, patient care was suffering, but they make a pretty credible case, the Globe Spotlight team, that the misfeasance or malfeasance, I would argue, has directly led to the deaths of at least 15 patients, I think they did in that report. You say you're doing an investigation. Malta has indicted Della Torre and a number 2. The U.S. Attorney's Office, the Globe reports, is looking at possible criminal charges. Are you?
So I can't speak to the specifics of our investigation. We obviously, I work with the U.S. Attorney quite a bit. We collaborate on a lot of different things, and each office speaks differently about what they can speak to, and I think you have to be actually very careful when you have an ongoing investigation. We have to be very careful here. I will say 2 things, though, that are at the top of the list for me right now. Number 1 is doing the most thorough and thoughtful investigation of not just principals, but of Stewart overall. That is ongoing, and I will absolutely come back to the public and everyone because they deserve to know not only what happened, how we got here, but how we're going to hold them accountable. The second is the legislative solutions here. This is a for-profit institution. I have been active at the State House pushing for not just language in a bill that has stalled a bit, but staying active in conversation with the legislature is also equally important to ensure our office as Attorney General, for example, has the authority to review certain transactions in real time versus later or after the fact to be able to hold folks accountable and make sure that patients and providers are protected every step of the way. So those 2 lanes we were actively working, and we'll absolutely come back to the public. We have more to share on Stewart in a way that is robust and responsive to all of the reporting, to all of the information we're receiving from various stakeholders, and to all the concerns we're receiving from constituents as well.
You said a minute ago, I don't know what your language was, but something like it's been a bit delayed in the legislature. The legislature, I know I'm a broken record, is on, despite what they call it, a 5-month vacation. The Speaker of the House comment on this legislation regulating places like Stewart is it was too important to rush it To which I think Margie and I would respond, don't rush it. Don't take a 5-month vacation and do your job and make sure that places like Stewart are regulated. Are you troubled that I know they say they didn't go home, but essentially adjourned except for informal sessions without having dealt with, I would argue, the most serious healthcare crisis in Massachusetts in years?
I can't speak to schedules and all that. I will say some still positive things are happening. I chair the MOVA board, which is victim comp. They just got their bridge funding, which is a big deal to close a significant gap to ensure they have the resources to help victims of crime as the federal government steps away. So they're doing some things, but going to keep pushing them. And they know time is of the essence here because as you have conversations about one for-profit institution in healthcare, more conversations, of course, are happening now as a result of what happened with Stewart in terms of other for-profit entities, not just in the traditional healthcare space, but also in the long-term care facility space, elder care space. And so these tools that we will need to hold folks accountable, not after the fact, but prior or during, will be significant. So we will keep working with the legislature to get this done.
Are you not, by the way, if I may, respectfully, unless there's unanimity, as you and I'm sure listeners know, with not one dissent, they won't even be able to address this till January as the Stewart situation goes on, as people continue to suffer in the Neshoba Valley and obviously with the closing of Kearney. Do you not believe they maybe should have extended their session long enough to address the Stewart situation?
I'm confident based on all the calls. They read the papers too. They understand what's at stake when it comes to Stewart. Lives have been lost. Lives are still damaged right now as I stand here. Folks have lost their jobs, are wondering what comes next in terms of care. The Kearney, where I would send my boys to the emergency room, is now closed. Neshoba, the same thing. There is tremendous heartache in these communities that DPH and the governor have to deal with. I think they get that. And so what we're stressing is we have to be able to expand our tools to deal with this. And that's my message to them and everyone else, that that's just as important as our accountability review and holding Stewart accountable. They both are equally important.
Attorney General, we've had several texts about a story that I think stunned and shocked a lot of us. A 25-year-old Worcester would-be state police officer, Enrique Delgado Garcia, I'm sure you know, he died in a training exercise at the academy, and they said it was a boxing training exercise, but when you read the story, this young man had a broken neck, was missing a bunch of teeth, and had bruises all over his body. The initial reporting made it sound like, well, it was a tragedy and he's died, and we're going to support this guy. But now there's an investigation into what happened there, because apparently this young man had told friends it was kind of like a hazing deal up there. Obviously, it's very rough training for the state police, but will you be running that investigation, or who will be in charge, or who will look into what happened that winds up with a broken neck in a training exercise?
This case is devastating. I actually was coming back from a conference when I got the news from some of my fellow troopers, and all of us were heartbroken. And I cried that night, thinking about the parents, right, who obviously you do your best to make sure your child has access to everything they can pursue their dreams. And when I learned more about Enrique, including the fact that he was a victim witness advocate in the DA's office for years, beloved in that office in the community, worked above and beyond, but dreamed of being a state trooper, so left that to then go, of course, through a grueling training to become a state trooper. You do need training, of course, and I think now the MSP has an opportunity to say, okay, while we make sure our folks have rigorous training, how do we ensure it's safe? So they're going to have to go back to the drawing board on that, obviously, and I think they will. But I thought about just this dream of becoming a state trooper. He's training, he's close to being done, working to protect and serve us here in the Commonwealth. So we are all heartbroken about this in the office. I have a state police unit in the office. They are heartbroken. I know fellow trainees who work with him for months are heartbroken. And absolutely his family is heartbroken. And so I'm a praying woman. I pray and continue to for them and offer my condolences. On the work side, what I recognize now is that we have to figure some things out, and we have to figure them out relatively quickly. The number one thing is I am in conversation with DA Early, who obviously is the Worcester County DA, and other agencies to talk about who is best positioned to take on this investigation.
Because he will not, because
He
of his
cannot.
relationship as
That's
the
right.
victim's
And rightfully
advocate in
so. We
his
all
office.
agree he has a conflict of interest. He knows the family. It's too deep.
Yeah.
And he recognized that early on. So we have been in conversation. And sometimes in these cases, you can go to another DA in another county. That's a possibility. Sometimes you can come to me in my office. And the question, though, becomes, are there conflicts in all of our offices?
Because they all have state cops.
And what that might look like. And so ultimately where I'm at is, as I'm driving this, talking to everyone, there are a lot of stakeholders involved, and we'll have a decision point very soon to figure out who is best to lead this investigation. And I want to say that not just to the family and the community, I get the sense of urgency here. They have a lot of questions. They need a point of contact to go to get those questions answered, and someone to navigate that investigation on their behalf. They will do that. But the other piece I want to stress for just an educational point for our constituents here is that's a criminal investigation because someone died that the DA can't do because of a conflict. So I have to figure out, well, who is best positioned to do that? But then there's the civil side. And so as a state's attorney, I also have the other side. I represent state agencies. I have represented the state police, of course, in different matters. And so if, for example, that comes about and I am called to represent them, that creates a conflict. So it's a dual role here that I have to navigate very carefully, and we will get to a place where the family, of course, has answers and an appropriate appointing authority to investigate this on their behalf and with them.
One last state police question before we take a break, Attorney General. I'm going to read you the first paragraph of a Globe story written by Danny McDonald, Shelley Murphy, and Sean Cotter. This is about Jeffrey Noble, who was the person picked by the governor to be the next Mass State Police Colonel next month. The veteran policeman tapped to helm the scandal-plagued Massachusetts State Police is the subject of at least 4 discrimination complaints that allege he bypassed qualified candidates who were gay, who were female, and people of color for promotions while fostering a culture of cronyism during his time as a leader of the New Jersey State Police. Does that concern you?
I want to take a step back. I obviously was not involved with the selection of the new colonel, and I expressed to him when he was selected, I look forward to working with him because I work closely with the colonel, not just because of the unit in the office, but the work we do to investigate all kinds of crimes and other things. So I'm unaware of any of this. I will say I think it's more appropriate directed to those who appointed him, who are more intimately involved with the background check of him, with the interview process. I was not privy to any of that. I'm an outsider like everybody else. What I do know is we need a permanent colonel. You can't address things within an agency if you have interim leadership. Colonel Mon has done the best he can. I work with him closely. He is interim. He knows that, doing the best he can. But we know if you're going to bring about culture change, if you're going to ensure that there's a diverse state police operation, they have the resources and tools to do their jobs effectively and appropriately, you need permanent leadership. And so that's where I stand back and say, this is who it is. Other questions have to go to the governor, the team, and the committee that was responsible. And I'm sure they have, I hope, have something more to share.
But you're the chief law enforcement officer in Massachusetts, and you do know about it now. I don't mean firsthand, obviously, but obviously you've read the Globe accounting. So have you voiced concern to the governor? Do you not consider that, or do you have concern? Do you consider that appropriate to voice concern? Or?
Of course, I read the paper like everybody else, and I take everything with a grain of salt. No offense to the Globe in the media, but obviously we have to do our own due diligence, et cetera. Sure. And so I am expecting, obviously, the governor, the committee that did this process, that they will respond to these with a thoughtful response, with one that offers a response to this, and that they're best positioned to do it because I was not involved. If I hired somebody and someone said, excuse me, ma'am, we found A, B, and C that is concerning, then of course I owe the public and folks a response.
We got to take a break.
That's the voice of Attorney General Andrea Campbell. She's going to be with us to the top of the hour. You can reach her or text her at 877-301-8970. We'll get to as many calls as texts as we can. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
a dual school system.
The demonstration on City Hall Plaza 2 days before school was to open.
A court mandate to desegregate.
On that first day of school, what I remembered most are the sounds.
This morning they were waiting for the blacks who arrived at South Boston High.
50 years, and still no reckoning.
We have to open up and talk about history.
Never Cried, Boston's busing legacy.
We can't pretend anymore.
Now playing on the GBH News YouTube channel.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Mass General Brigham, dedicated to building a world-class center of cancer care. With the most cancer surgeries and specialists in New England, they're committed to being with patients for every twist and turn. Learn more at massgeneralbrigham.org/cancer. And S&H Construction, committed to using craftsmanship and technical experience to build spaces that work, and professional management to guide you through the process. shconstruction.com. And Dover Rug and Home, rugs and carpeting for today's lifestyle with in-home rug trial and design consultation. Dover Rug in Natick, Boston, Burlington, and online at doverrug.com. Dover Rug, rugs and the people who know them. And Comcast, offering Xfinity Internet, designed to provide a connection for home networks so everyone can be online at once, even during peak hours. More information at xfinity.com.
The world takes you outside your borders and connects you with the most important events happening all across this big blue marble.
We introduce you to memorable people whose stories will stay with you for a lifetime. I'm Marco Werman.
And I'm Carolyn Beeler, global news and inspiring voices that will keep you on top of the world.
Listen each weekday.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the library, streaming online at youtube.com/GBH. We're back here tomorrow at the library with former Mayor Kim Janey, the NAACP's Michael Curry, and Ted Landsmark on 50 years since Boston busing. By the way, we have a text question, which we're going to get to at 12:55. And the one is, Donald Trump says he's all in on crypto. We want to know if you think he even understands what crypto is. And if you can help us out by texting, explaining a little, which we can share with our audience, we'd appreciate that too at 877-301-8970. We continue to be joined by the Attorney General for the rest of this hour. You can, well, the phone lines are full. You can text her at 877-301-8970.
Allison in Cambridge, you are on with the Attorney General. Thank you for calling.
Hi, Allison.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm really concerned about all the talk about removing the MCAS as a graduation requirement. I taught high school English during the pandemic, and I saw firsthand what happens to instruction in the classrooms when the graduation requirement is removed, especially for our most marginalized kids. It really is scaring me. So I'm interested to know, Attorney General, what your position on this is.
Thank you, Allison, for the question. I will say I haven't taken actually a public position weighing on it, but I've, in the past, have spoken to the value of the MCAS system. I was reluctant in the beginning to speak on this one because, as you know, probably, Allison, it goes through the office as a ballot review process. But in the past, I have said there is tremendous value in testing our students and the MCAS, using MCAS. And if we think it needs to be revamped and improved, we should do that.
Allison, thank you for your call. 877-301.
And thank you for being a teacher.
Marjorie's
it's a tough
happy
job.
because
The Attorney General's made me very happy.
Yeah.
But it's a tough job. I'm telling you, I dropped my boys off at school, and I praise the teacher, the assistant teacher, the principal, and God bless them. They have a tough job. They work hard to educate our youngest, including my youngest just graduated from his daycare. And we don't pay them enough, so I'll just leave that at
We
that.
do not.
Especially daycare folks and family providers.
Yeah.
So thank you, Yaya and Miss Marina, for taking care of our Alexander and our Aiden. They're doing well at BPS.
Beth in Jamaica Plain, you're on with the Attorney General.
Hi, Attorney General. I was very happy to know that during Maura Healey's administration, you've enacted an environmental justice policy for the state of Massachusetts. And I wanted to talk about that pertaining to the White Stadium project, which is going to have huge impacts on the environmental justice communities of Mattapan and Roxbury and Dorchester, as far as loss of tree canopy, impacted traffic on state roads as well as the local roads, and noise and congestion. Mayor Wu is saying the project that's exempt from MEPA review. And I want to know, I feel like the environmental justice policy should be applied specifically in these neighborhoods and being taken a look at related to this project.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you, Beth, for the question. We're not intimately involved in this one because it really is, right now at least, advocates and various residents on one side and the mayor on the other, and they are figuring that out. That being said, we did meet with some of these advocates and will continue to stay in touch with them about their concerns related to the project, including, so on the EJ work, that continues, but we got to be careful because it's some of it's in our wheelhouse and some of it is not. But that being said, on the environmental justice work, that continues. I now have a director of environmental justice within our EPD department and Energy Environment Bureau, which never existed before, and with a intentionality, actually, I would say a greater intentionality of where we are showing up across the state, not just Boston, across the entire Commonwealth, in terms of our climate work, our energy work, our transition to clean energy. All of that is happening with greater intentionality. And we meet with stakeholders all the time. We have a stakeholder advisory group that informs our work. So we are in conversation with some of these folks, but careful to navigate, particularly where there is lawsuits and things between other stakeholders. And then one other thing I do want to mention that is a success story that I don't think has gotten enough attention. Through our EJ work, we, of course, use federal laws to enforce environmental protections across the Commonwealth, and we have the ability to take that money through settlements and put it back into communities to address environmental injustice, designed grants with community to help them. We couldn't do that for a long time with our state settlement dollars, and we now have, through the advocacy working with the legislature, including Senator Gomez and Rep. Brandy Fluker-Oakley, Environmental Justice Fund, Trust Fund, which allows us to take state money that we win from settlements and put it back into communities. And I know that's not direct to your point, but that is a big lane that we have where we continue to prioritize EJ. And on this particular issue, we'll remain in touch with all stakeholders on their concerns. And hopefully, as sometimes we are able to do, be a convener and be one to broker some conversations where people can get to a conclusion that they appreciate.
Beth, thanks for the call. We spoke a lot last year about the vote in Milton to not comply with the MBTA Communities Act. Briefly, that was the thing that was advocated for by Charlie Baker. You can explain in a minute exactly what it does. There's litigation between you and Milton now. There's some other communities that are in non-compliance. I think the Milton case is being heard by the state's highest court in October. Could you give us a brief summary of where we are on this compliance and what percentage of communities are complying, Attorney General?
I can get you the numbers.
Roughly.
But I would say overwhelmingly, we're still in a place where overwhelmingly the majority of communities are in compliance and taking steps to get into compliance. And where we are, of course, is filing briefs with the court, the highest court, the SJC in this case. October is their decision point. We're looking forward to that because we think it would be extremely helpful. We obviously wanted it sooner, but the court decided to delay it. And we think it will be helpful because we think they will say, and we're hoping that and pushing that through all of our filings, that not only is the MBTA Communities Law mandatory, but that our office and my office has the authority to enforce it. And because it's mandatory and we have the authority to enforce it, we also have an obligation and responsibility to work with municipality as in violation of that law to get them to come into compliance. And so we're confident in our arguments and waiting for the court, which will help us, of course, with other municipalities that still have question marks. But I will stress this because a lot of folks still don't know MBTA Communities Law is a law passed by a Republican governor at the time, Charlie Baker, a Democratic legislature, where they came together and said the housing crisis in Massachusetts is significant. And the voluntary tools that we have are just not working to get more housing online that is affordable and available to public employees, to young families, to seniors who want to downsize, et cetera. This law will make a difference. And they made it mandatory on purpose because most previous laws were voluntary. So I stress that because it's important. And why? Right now, the number one issue in Massachusetts is affordability. Everything is too expensive. My home, my healthcare, my housing, my education, student loan debt, you name it. The median income rate, I should say, sales price for a home in Massachusetts is close to $1 million. That means more people will leave our great state, more of our talent will say goodbye. This is a major issue. This is just one tool to help address it. So we are going to insert ourselves. And the other piece I have to mention is we have now a housing affordability unit, which we never had before. It's the first time in the office's history, where it's going to demonstrate to folks publicly that we're going to prioritize the issue of housing, the enforcement of our laws, but also work with municipalities and developers on zoning, land use regulations, et cetera, which we're doing to bring about more housing. And I just got, so right now, 175 are taking steps to come into compliance. So kudos to all of those municipalities that will never make a list in the news for the work they're doing with our office.
That's almost every community that's covered by
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
One last quick thing, and I'm hoping you forget that I asked this question last year. If this law is mandatory, as you just said, could you explain briefly why people are allowed to vote, to comply? Well, robbery is illegal. Do they get to vote in Milton whether or not robbery is going to be I'm serious. I don't get this at all.
So we did not go after the ballot process, et cetera. There are pros and cons in doing that, and we don't want to be in the business, at least our office, of overturning local elections, et cetera. So we are focused on the law itself and our lawsuit, of course, against Milton. There are, of course, concerns about it, but each process is different. But we didn't want to be in that business. We have enough going on at the federal level where you have a former president who was talking about not only not accepting the results of elections in a presidential election, but also using violence as a result. So we didn't think that was necessary to even go there. We think the merits itself in terms of the law itself, the history of its passage, is sufficient to make it clear that it's mandatory and folks need to come into compliance because all of us have to do something with respect to this housing crisis. I don't know about you. It wasn't not too long ago that the price was closer to $500,000.
Yeah.
And quickly has come to be close to $1 million.
It's crazy.
And so everyone who lives in Massachusetts should be absolutely concerned about this affordability question and asking what are their elected officials doing to address it.
You know, Attorney General, one of our colleagues, Saray Wintersmith, did a terrific story about this company based in Roxbury, this Blue Hub, Capital, and about a dozen homeowners have said that they were basically duped by Blue Hub Capital. They were trying to escape foreclosure. They thought they were being rescued, but then they wound up getting this, signing up for this separate second mortgage, known as a shared appreciation mortgage. And the bottom line that they were going to be paying these monthly payments, lower monthly payments, in exchange for a share of the value of the home going down. They basically think they were duped by this company. Our buddy, Bruce Marks, we have him on the radio from time to time. He's from the Neighborhood Assistance Corporation of America, NACA, who's a big guy for home ownership, says you're not doing enough to prevent Blue Hub from basically ripping off these people. What's happening?
I know Bruce well, and I would emphatically push back on that argument that we're not doing enough. We take every consumer protection case very serious. My Consumer Protection Division works really hard, and particularly on this predatory lending, these predatory lending schemes. I even hired someone at the executive level to even think about how we can use these type of tools to close the racial wealth gap with greater intentionality, not just on protecting consumers generally, but also on the racial wealth gap. So specifically Blue Hub, I have learned about Blue Hub when I was on the city council, because some of these constituents live in District 4, the council district I used to represent. And at that time, took their information and concerns and brought it to the AG's office. I'm now, of course, the AG presented with Blue Hub. And our Consumer Protection Division is aware of the complaints. The challenge is right now there's a class action suit against Blue Hub, which we think should unfold. It's currently before the court. There's a summary judgment motion. And we're going to follow and see what happens with that, which is another way, of course, to get accountability. So we're keeping our eyes on that, and we're following that closely. And that was not mentioned in a flyer. And I appreciate folks advocating and saying where we come up short, because we will work to fix it. There are no egos here. We do great work, and we can always do better. But in this case, we were following this closely and following what's happening with that lawsuit. The second piece is there is a piece of legislation at the State House. And in the flyer, it was inaccurate, and I would say this to Bruce and others, in this idea that we didn't take any stance on it. We had
It would make that shared appreciation model explicitly legal.
That's right.
Go ahead.
And we said, absolutely not. We were against any industry going to the State House, including a Blue Hub, and looking to create an exception from our consumer protection laws. So if anything, we stand with the constituents and Bruce on this issue, because no one should be exempt from our consumer protection laws. And if someone's trying to do that, we should all sort of have flags go up where we say, well, why is that? Because we always want to have that as an avenue to hold anyone accountable if something goes wrong in a model, in a lending product, or anything they think initially is a great thing, but then causes harm, whether intentionally or not. And so we oppose that, and that aligns with Bruce and the advocates. So we will continue to stay in touch with folks. We're going to continue to follow this. It is absolutely on our radar. And we think this class action suit is going to move quite quickly, actually.
In time to prevent people from losing their homes?
Well, I can't speak to specifics on anyone's individual case.
Yeah.
They can bring that to us. So, for example, we have a constituent who absolutely is in a bind right now. Our office always works with folks. We are always creative in keeping people in their home. Even when the laws aren't on their side, we can call various folks and advocate and use our office to protect our people. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't, but we do our best to keep people in their homes, especially in Massachusetts. And so that was not what was presented to us. If we have specific cases in that instance, we're happy to look into those.
Can I just read one more paragraph from Soraya's story? Because I never heard about this shared appreciation thing. When asked by the judge in the case whether the disclosures that borrowers sign at closing show the percentage of sharing that the lender is going to get from the appreciation, the spokesperson for Blue Hub acknowledged they did not, but said customers do receive formulas that can be used to calculate appreciation. It's outrageous.
So
in any case,
I will just say, this is why we're following it in the courts, and I think it's a thoughtful judge, and it's of course a thoughtful process, and we will continue to follow that closely. But on the larger predatory lending schemes, that is a priority of the Division of Consumer Protection, not just looking at companies here who are offering products that will harm our constituents and steal their money without transparency and full disclosure on what that product will look like, the tactics they use to sign people up, but we're also looking at companies that are not based here, who are coming here to take advantage of folks and to take their money from them, frankly. And we've been really thoughtful and creative on how we help folks. So I would say if anyone has concerns about that, they should reach out to our office as well.
do you want to say something nice about your kids' teachers one more time, just so they do well? You only have 20 seconds.
They're at a Boston public school, and the teachers, the principals, they all work very hard. Aiden just started kindergarten, and Alexander's in second grade, and so far so good. And the teachers work hard, and the daycare that had them before, you know, they helped us grow our little guys, and we miss Yaya and Miss Marina and Ziamora, and they don't get the pay they deserve.
They do not.
They don't get the credit they deserve for shaping the lives of incredible human beings. So
your kids just got 2 A's.
To all the early care providers and the teachers, and remind folks to keep getting out to mobilize around this election. Critically important.
By the way, we're going to tell you at 12. There's voter registration happening right here in the library from noon to 4.
Wonderful.
We'll tell you about it at 12 o'clock.
Okay, that was Attorney General Andrea Campbell. We thank you very much for giving us your time. She comes here once a month, and we really appreciate it. After the noon news, Caitlin Clark keeps breaking records in another hit season with the WNBA. We're going to talk about that and a bunch of other sports news with Trenni Casey of NBC Sports Boston. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Comes from you.
It's not over yet. More smart conversation about community issues is up ahead with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Eakin on Boston Public Radio, right after a news update from NPR. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you and Massachusetts EDU. On the next American Masters, explore the story of Dominican-American poet and novelist Julia Alvarez, who blazed a trail for a generation of Latina authors. Watch Julia Alvarez, A Life Reimagined, tonight at 9 on GBH2.
I'm Nightside News anchor Mary Blake, and you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with
I'm Jim Browdy, ahead on hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library. It's NBC Sports Boston's Trenni Casey on yet another.
Tufts undergrad is helping us all find the cheapest cup of Dunkin' Donuts coffee. Then our text question of the day. Former President Donald Trump has an exciting new business venture, crypto. Only problem? Trump cannot seem to explain what crypto is or how it works. Can you? Can any of us? Text us your crypto explainers. It's all next on hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi.
As alleged, Combs used force, threats of force, and coercion to cause victims to engage in extended sexual performances with male commercial sex workers, some of whom he transported or caused to be transported over state lines. Combs allegedly planned and controlled the sex performances, which he called freak-offs.
The U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York says injuries were inflicted on victims that took days or weeks to heal. Williams says the alleged crimes date back to 2008. Earlier today, Combs' attorney Mark Agnifilo told reporters on his way to the courthouse that his client is not guilty. He was asked about the prospects of securing Combs' release.
I'm going to fight like hell to get him released, and he should be released with all that he's done and coming here voluntarily.
U.S. Attorney Williams noted it was only a year ago that Combs stood in Times Square and was handed the key to the city. Today, Williams says Combs is facing justice in the Southern District of New York. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says the state is conducting its own investigation of the man arrested for an apparent assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. And as NPR's Greg Allen reports, DeSantis believes the state's case should take precedence over the federal prosecution.
Ryan Ruth is being held on 2 weapons charges while federal prosecutors prepare a broader indictment. But at a news conference in West Palm Beach, Governor DeSantis questioned whether the U.S. Justice Department, which is prosecuting Trump in 2 criminal cases, can handle Ruth's prosecution fairly and transparently.
In my judgment, it's not in the best interest of our state or our nation to have the same federal agencies that are seeking to prosecute Donald Trump leading this investigation.
DeSantis says another reason Florida should take the lead on Ruth's prosecution is that its maximum penalty for attempted murder, life in prison, is more severe than any federal crimes he could be charged with. Greg Allen, NPR News, West Palm Beach, Florida.
Federal mediators are scheduled to join contract talks between Boeing and its striking machinists today. NPR's Josh Snyder says thousands of union employees walked off the job late last week.
In a post on the X social media platform, the machinists union said the federal mediator cannot impose an agreement, but acts as a neutral party to help both sides reach a deal. The fresh talks come a day after Boeing imposed a series of cost-cutting measures. The company says they're necessary because the strike jeopardizes Boeing's recovery. More than 30,000 machinists union members have been off the job since Friday.
That's Josh Snyder reporting. It's NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Police are searching for a gunman after a woman and toddler were shot in Dorchester last Monday night. The BPD says they responded to a ShotSpotter alert about 11:40 p.m. That child was taken to a local hospital with life-threatening injuries. Police Commissioner Michael Cox is now asking the public for help.
This is a pretty heinous act in general, pretty cowardly. I can't think of any reason why somebody would, shoot both a female and a young child for any reason.
Anyone with information is urged to contact police directly or use the BPD's confidential tips line. If you live in Boston and are the one who pays the bills in your house, you don't need me to tell you how expensive things are. However, they could be more expensive than you imagine. A recent report found that Boston was among the highest energy burdens of 25 U.S. cities. The report shows only 4 other cities have a higher household energy burden than Boston, and they are Birmingham, Alabama, Rochester, New York, Memphis, and Pittsburgh. The costs are especially high for Boston's low-income households. The median low-income energy burden, 13.7% of their incomes. And the report says 1 in 4 homes devotes nearly 23% of their income to those bills. And Boston's Black and Hispanic households, regardless of income level, are paying more as well. Red Sox in Tampa Bay tonight. It's a 6:50 start. Patriots play the Jets on Thursday night football. Another sunny day today. Temps in the low 80s. We are at 78 right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Subaru, featuring the new 2025 Forester with an updated exterior design and an 11.6-inch Starlink multimedia interface. Learn more at Subaru.com. This is NPR.
He is Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, where, I should say, members of Boston's election department are on site right now for National Voter Registration Day. You can register right here at the Boston Public Library from noon to 4 p.m. in the lobby right here, right near where we are broadcasting. We also want to say we are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're going to be back here tomorrow with former Mayor Kim Janey, the NAACP's Michael Curran, and Ted Landspark. You might remember he was the black lawyer in a three-piece suit who was attacked by an American flagpole on City Hall Plaza.
Pulitzer Prize-winning photograph,
by
was it
Stanley
not?
Foreman,
Yeah,
yeah, formerly of the Boston Herald, who won 2 Pulitzer Prizes, actually. We're going to talk about the 50 years since Boston busing. And one more thing before we get started here. Here is our text prompt of the day. We'll read your responses just before the 1 o'clock news. So, former President Donald Trump's latest money-grabbing scheme, his core family business is now centralized finance, a.k.a. crypto. But let's say Jim and I are a little suspicious. Do you think Donald Trump has any idea what crypto really is? Text us at 877-301-8970. And if you can explain crypto to me and Jim in one sentence, we'd love to hear that too. Hello again, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie. We're joined now by Trenni Casey, anchor and reporter for NBC Sports Boston and a BPR contributor. Welcome, Trenni.
Hi, guys.
Hi
Just
there.
emptying my savings account to invest in crypto.
Yeah.
Well, you can explain it to us, too, if you'd like.
I don't really understand it. I don't get it.
I'd stick around if I were you then. Okay, fine.
So, Trenni Casey, a lot of us saw on television the Dolphins, Miami Dolphins quarterback, Tua
Tagovailoa.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Basically ram his head into another player when he was playing the other night. It was gruesome to watch. This is, I believe, his 4th concussion, and he's now facing a decision whether or not he should keep playing.
Yeah, and he said yesterday that he is not going to retire from football. And this comes after, a dozen current and former coaches and players. His mother has encouraged him to retire. Tua's not, listen, for a quarterback, he's not huge, right? He's a big guy, but not big. Not that matters anyway. But he has been susceptible to concussions. He had 1 documented concussion his final year of college. It says that he's had 3 documented concussions while with the Miami Dolphins, but really he had 4. He had one in a game, and I can't remember if it was against the Bengals or against the Bills, and then the second injury came against the other team. But he had one where the red hat, the concussion spotter, the neurologist, did not pull him from the game, even though he seemed dazed and confused. They put him back in to the football game, and a week later he took a hit and was knocked out cold. And then in retrospect, people looked and said, he probably shouldn't have been playing. He was suffering a traumatic brain injury, and you put him back out there. He has since suffered 2 more, including the one last Thursday night. And it was a routine play, right? We see this all the time. He had a lane to run, and he was going for a first down, and he just sort of plowed. He didn't even plow head first, really, into, of all people, Damar Hamlin.
The guy almost died on the football field.
Right, who had a cardiac arrest on the football field, plays for the Buffalo Bills, a safety. He rammed into him and just kind of hit his neck in an odd way, fell backwards, and had a telltale sign of a traumatic brain injury, which is called a fencing arm, which means your hand sort of clutches and then straightens. which is a signal that your brain is sending to your body. He looked woozy when he got up. He did walk off the field on his own volition, but he certainly didn't look like he had all of his faculties about him. And listen, I know, Jim, I have a feeling I know what you're going to ask. Can the NFL prevent him from playing?
That's exactly what I know they can't.
No, these are, at the end of the day, they are grown men who can make decisions with their own. We talk all the time about women and bodily autonomy. And right or wrong, these guys have bodily autonomy. And if he wants to keep playing, now he does have to get cleared. Right, so it's not like he can say, hey, I want to play Sunday. He needs to clear concussion protocol. And I do wonder if the Miami Dolphins will be more conservative considering the number of concussions he's had and just not clear him as quickly for his own sake. But they can't force him to retire.
You know, a couple of things on this. We've talked about this in the past when there have been other horrible circumstances. I just want to promote this wonderful organization, the Concussion Legacy Foundation, founded by Chris Nowinski, who was a football player at Harvard, a professional wrestler, suffered concussions himself, and Dr. Robert Cantu, and a whole host of wonderful people who, by the way, recommend that kids should not play tackle football till they're 14, which should be a good start, because we've learned in recent years those hits, even at early age, are cumulative and pile up. I have to say...
Excuse me, can I say one thing while you mentioned Chris Nowinski?
Yeah.
That I just want to say our colleague Shirley Leung has a great interview with Chris Nowinski on her podcast.
Podcast? Oh, great.
Say More. It's a great podcast, and it's addressing this very issue. Concussion expert Chris Nowinski.
Can I tell you something? I'm sure people are going to say, mind your own business. This is so grossly irresponsible by this young man. He's got a family.
I know.
He would just signed a $240 million contract, and by my reading, even if he were to retire tomorrow, he'd get $120 million, which I would say would take care of the next maybe 40 generations of his family. 3 concussions that we know about. There may be
4
more.
if you count.
No, 3 and 5. I mean, in the pros, in
the
5
pros,
years,
yes.
in addition to wherever he was, Alabama. How many of these people who have had 3 concussions we know about are in good shape when they're 50, when they're retired, trying to live? It is just and I understand the desire to play, and he's a great player. And people say that image when he was walking off the field after the concussion, when the coach kissed him on the head, almost made, I mean, this coach really seems to be a mensch. Having said that, he should talk his lead quarterback out of playing. It's just, and by the way, a lot of other football players who are huge stars, Hall of Famers, have said, don't play anymore, Tua.
We had to pare down the number of, because this led our show last Friday, and we had to pare down the number of reactions we aired because there were so many calling for him to retire.
Football players.
Football players. That's what was different to me about this incident than other previous incidents where guys suffer concussions. Like, I think there is a true understanding now of the long-term effects of a traumatic brain injury. Like, forget about how you feel 5 weeks from now when maybe you'll if you're ready to take the field again. How are you going to feel 10, 15, 20 years down the line? I just, and I understand that it's difficult, right? I can't imagine.
I appreciate that too.
I can't imagine playing a sport for a living and knowing that your career could be over before you're 30 or right around the time that you're 30.
Well, it's very sad.
And unfortunately, we've talked about this on the show before. We do not prepare especially our top tier athletes, we don't prepare them for life after sport. School is not emphasized. These guys are not student athletes. They're athletes who happen to be students at a university, especially now with NIL money. Education, internships, job experience, none of those things are emphasized. So I think for a lot of these guys, and while we look at the Rob Gronkowskis and the Tom Bradys who go on to sign these $100 million deals to be broadcasters, how many of these guys actually end up in broadcasting? Maybe 2 or 3%. So what do all of those other people do with the rest of their lives? I can't imagine. It's daunting to start thinking about retirement when you're my age and you're actually like within sort of a window of when it might happen. And, you do something forever and you have to think about it maybe ending at some point. But imagine having that thought and that conversation with yourself when you're 27 to 32 years old. It's very, very difficult. And the league and our society does not prepare these guys.
Speaking of Brady, one more second on this because it's really important. One, Tom Brady, in an act of grotesque irresponsibility when he was playing in his prime, after somebody suffered horrible after effects from a concussion, was asked by a reporter, what do you tell your kids, or your son, I guess? Was it Jack? Is that his?
Jack, I think is his oldest,
and his answer was, I tell him, follow your heart. Whatever you want to do, you do. And the impact of a player, assuming Tua goes back and plays, to me at least, I don't know what experts like Nowinski and Dr. Cantu would say, it seems to me if you're a kid who idolizes football players, you watch a guy get his 3rd concussion in 5 years, his 4th concussion at least that we know about, and he went back and played, well, that must be okay. It must be okay. He got a concussion. He had serious brain damage, but now he's well enough, says the 12-year-old who loves football playing the game. maybe I don't have to worry about that either. And by the way, the other thing, I'm sorry to rant, but I didn't know he was wearing a helmet, not that extra protective thing we discussed with you a few weeks ago.
Which more and more players, by the way, have been wearing.
I know. I saw one Patriot wearing it.
Jabril Peppers.
Which I was so proud of the guy for. But in any case, he was wearing a helmet that both the Players Union, which is one of the weakest unions in professional sports, and the league had both said was the safest helmet. The point of it is there's no safe helmet.
No.
It's safer, but the guy still got a concussion. So I hope for the good of his family and kids in this country, he rethinks this
You know
thing.
what I don't know, and you probably don't know it either, so why am I asking? Just because
You can ask
Go
anyway.
for it.
Maybe I do.
I'm wondering if all this talk about concussions and how they can start very early in your career. I mean, kids in high school, it can have these repercussions from concussions. Is this impacted little kids like Pop Warner football at
I do
all?
know the answer to this. I mean, this is maybe a little anecdotal, but yes, I do think it has in some senses. I went home to Wisconsin like 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago. My nephew plays flag football. They play flag football until they're 12 or 13 years old. They are not allowed to play tackle football until a certain age. Mark Bertrand, who's on the radio at 98.5 The Sports Hub, all three of his boys play flag football. I don't think in his area they're allowed to play tackle, again, until 12 or 13 years old. So there are communities that have come together, and they're really, and listen, I don't like to give the NFL too much credit, but they've really partnered with flag football, and they do see flag as maybe the future of the game, because it is obviously, it's a less, I don't want to say impactful is not the right word, but impacting. It's a less violent sport. That's a better word. It's a less violent sport. When I'm watching these little 9-year-olds run around, they're still kind of plowing into each other because that's what you see on TV, but it's not the repetitive hits. They're running, they're pulling a flag off of a kid. Maybe a kid falls or a kid accidentally, but you get penalized if you tackle somebody in flag football. So it is discouraged to do that. So yes, I do think it is having, I think it is having a change.
Okay, so can we talk about something good? Caitlin Clark. This kid is on. Here is some sound of this rookie who probably wasn't going to be good enough to play in the WNBA well, breaking first the scoring season record and then breaking the assist record. Here's a little sound from announcers on both.
Zoom trying to frustrate Clark. Oh, but Clark with 3 more. Right over the rookie. Caitlin Clark has 6 assists, has set the record.
I mean, it is unbelievable what this young woman has done.
Especially because of how she started. Like the conversation around Caitlin Clark when she entered the league and really the first month that she played for the Indiana Fever wasn't about how great she was playing. It was, is she overrated? Is she really ready?
Yes.
The veteran players warned her this is a different game than college. But really since right before the Olympic and All-Star break, and then, you know what, I think it's a good thing she didn't play in the Olympics. She had some time to rest. It's really the first time she's probably had in well over a year. She finally knows her teammates a little bit better, and now she's broken the rookie scoring record. She has 746 points total, and she still has a game to play. But you know what's exciting? Well, I mean, it's obviously we all hoped that the Connecticut Sun would finish 1 or 2 in their division, but it looks like they're going to finish 3, which means they're going to play Caitlin Clark in the Indiana Fever in the postseason. So it'll be a really exciting postseason around here. And look out, because the Indiana Fever are on a tear right now. Like they have gone from a terrible team with the worst record in the WNBA and having the first overall pick to being a legitimate playoff contender. I don't know if they're good enough to beat, although they did take the Aces the other night. I think they lost on the road in Vegas to the Aces by only 3 or 4 points.
See, they haven't beaten them this
year.
They
haven't beaten them yet this year, but they have gotten close. So keep an eye on that team as one that, could make a little noise and score an upset in the postseason.
It is unbelievable. And I think I'm a perfect example. I don't think I watched a WNBA game. Not only do I watch when I can or go online, when I go to ESPN's website, I check to see how some of the key players whose names I now know did. Not just Caitlin Clark, by the way, but a ton of these great women athletes.
Asia Wilson on the Las Vegas Aces just set another WNBA record. She scored 1,000 points for the first time ever in a season in the league. She's arguably the best player in the WNBA right now. It certainly has gained a ton of steam. The Ringer has recently, which is for those of you who are really into sports, that is the Bill Simmons, who's from here originally. It's his media venture. It's podcasts and a website. They're doing a WNBA podcast about it. I mean, it's getting more and more attention. It'll still take a while. Unfortunately, these things do, but it has certainly gained a ton of traction this year.
Okay, let's move on to the two things not as bad as we thought segment of the show today. Let's start with the New England Patriots.
Yeah, I mean, they're 1-1 to start the season, which is better than anybody. Like, I had them starting 0-4. With a possible win against Seattle, so it's kind of funny that they actually beat Cincinnati and lost to Seattle. The problem is with the Patriots is that, listen, they're better. If you watched the games, watch both games. They're more fun to watch. They're certainly less maddening to watch this year because they're not making stupid, boneheaded mistakes. They're not committing penalties, at crucial times. I know they had a DPI, that's defensive pass interference, in overtime against the Seahawks. So that was kind of a bogus call.
That was the end of the game.
That was the end of the game. Kind of a bogus call on Jonathan Jones there. But listen, those things are going to happen, right? They happen to the best of teams. Like, at least they don't look like a dumpster fire. The problem is...
It's a hell of an endorsement, isn't it?
I know. They're just not talented. They're just not talented enough. Like, your wide receivers, all of your wide receivers combined for 3 catches for 19 yards the other day. Like, you cannot win football games. And everyone's like, oh, but they can run the ball. Yeah, you can, except for when everybody knows that you're going to run the ball. Then in crucial situations like we saw on Sunday, they get stopped. And now they have a season-ending injury to Jawan Bentley. This comes on the heels of losing Christian Barmore to blood clots and trading away Matthew Judon. So that's a problem. I guess the one thing, and everyone's kind of been looking forward to, like, okay, if they're not great, but they kind of hang in it enough, like, when will we see Drake May? Does anybody want to see Drake May out there behind that offensive line? They lost a left tackle again, so now they're down to their 3rd string left tackle. I know this is really in the weeds for people like listening to NPR, but for those of you who are big sports fans, or aren't, you can at least like regurge this at the water cooler. Like, it's kind of a mess. Like, I don't know if I want to I don't know how closely you've been following the other rookie quarterbacks in the league.
I have.
But like, Caleb Williams is behind a not great offensive line in Chicago, and he has looked like trash.
Kid in Washington won this week.
Jaden
Daniels
Daniels did win
pick.
this week. Yep. He's, you know what, though? Everybody said he was the most NFL ready because of his legs. He only threw for like 229 yards.
What's up with his legs?
Well, he can run. That's what they say. When he's got legs, it means he can like run. And
he's got really good legs.
That's
what she meant to say.
He has some gams
really
on.
Fine
He's got
legs.
some
Gams. Yeah, we saw him in his Bermuda shorts, and he was looking good.
No, it means he's got legs. He can run, so he can create plays with his legs. Which, I think Drake May can also. It's just like, do you want him to end up being like Bryce Young, the quarterback in Carolina, who was the #1 overall pick last year, and now he's been benched 2 games into the season?
I feel bad for the guy. I don't even know who he is.
It's just, but you don't want. I hope they handle Drake May right and they don't screw him up.
Can we talk
Okay, yes, let's talk about these not so bad part 2. This involves, of course, a former Tom Terrific, well, he's always Tom Terrific, I guess, quarterback of the Patriots, Tom Brady. We were trashing him, or we weren't trashing him, I guess. People trashed his first appearance as a sportscaster last week. But here he is, this is week number 2, breaking down a pass from Derek Carr to Chris Olave, thank you, to set up a touchdown for the New Orleans Saints. Here's Tom Brady.
You're always looking to find chunk plays in the game. Kubiak, his whole system's on display here. Fast motion, across the field, get the linebackers to communicate. Carr's stepping up in the pocket. The speed of these 2 wide receivers forces separation in this zone coverage. What you're looking for, chunks like that.
Is that the improved Brady or the horrible Brady?
I know I'm listening to that. I think it's a little rough. Like, listen, I know people look at people who are on television and are like a bunch of dummies. All they have to do is read a prompter. Like how hard can it be? It's hard. It's not easy to talk for 3 hours. Just because you can see something doesn't mean you can explain it succinctly for the audience at home. Like, again, I'm not saying we're Rhodes Scholars or anything like that, but like
some of you are.
It is some of us are. Maybe Sue O'Connell is. I certainly am. Are you? Are you a Rhodes Scholar?
Well, not quite. Let's put it that way.
Wouldn't you know he'd say that?
Are you kidding me?
Oh.
No.
I didn't know. Maybe.
None of us are Rhodes Scholars.
Anyway, it's a difficult craft to learn, and he is so. I read a really great article after his first appearance. And it might have even been John Tomasi who wrote this on NBC
By the way,
Sports
he's
Boston.
really
He's great.
I know he's your buddy.
He's great.
Talented columnist.
You and he used to do a radio show together in the weekend, which I actually listened to, which was great.
Back in the day.
But go ahead.
He pointed out, like, this is someone who is, like, he watches all this film and he over-prepares. Like, part of being a good broadcaster is sometimes not over-preparing and just reacting naturally. I love how Susan...
That's my motto right here.
Don't prepare at all. No, but I think there's a delicate balance of preparing too much and then preparing too little. But I mean, part of what, and I know Tony Romo now is like, his act has grown tired. I don't really like listening to him on the CBS broadcasts. But like, I think what people liked about him in his first year before he kind of got a big head was that it was really authentic, right? Like, he could predict plays before they happened. His reactions to big plays were really exciting. Like, that first week for Tom Brady, there was like a 72-yard field goal hit, and even Scott Hansen, who's a really great guy, he does red zone.
72-yard field goal?
Yeah, it was like wild. And Brady like had no reaction, and they took it live on Red Zone, which is this NFL NFL Network thing where you
like
can watch all the games.
Thing, right?
It's on, like, they pop between all the live games. So if you don't have a package,
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, you can see all the games, like the crucial moments in every game that's happening in that window. And Scott Hansen was like, get excited, Tom Brady. And that's what everyone's thinking. Like, I'm listening to him there.
The guy had to apologize the next day for saying it. How pathetic is that?
God, the way they kissed Tom Brady's butt. Like, learn, first of all, you're a broadcaster, so people are going to criticize you. That's just part of the industry.
Right.
But also, like, you sound like a robot there.
But
like, in that clip
by the way,
you played,
that is exactly what
he does.
It's a robot.
He does. And I think it was interesting, we all wrote him off. There was a great piece about this. Who wrote the piece about him saying he was lousy in his second game?
The Athletic, I think.
For the New England Patriots years ago, too. But here's what I wonder. His voice does sound weird. But on the other hand, if I were a real football nerd, I would love to hear Tom Brady, a really great quarterback, analyzing quarterbacks, their different moves and how they do it and stuff like that. Now, maybe they all do that really well, so he's nothing unique, but...
I mean, some people are just, again, like, I'm watching Troy Aikman, and we watched I watched the first half of the Monday night game last night. Like, Troy Aikman and Joe Buck just have this really easy flow between the two of them because they work so long together. But something Troy Aikman's really good at, and I think Greg Olsen was really good at this. It's
That's
sort of
the
like
guy who was
Brady replaced, like this 30,000 feet view. Like, tell me something that honestly I don't know as a viewer.
Yeah.
Like, I want to learn something from you that I didn't know
like,
before.
for example, he should say in the middle of that play, the pass from whoever to whoever, here's
Derek
why I
Carr to
broke
Chris
up
Olave.
with Giselle. I mean, that's what we want to know. We don't give a damn about. By the way, you know what should happen? I know I'm not the first.
What should happen,
Tues
Jim?
down for at least 4 or 5 weeks. I think he should never play again.
Tom Brady
leaves the broadcast booth, signs with the Miami Dolphins, where I think he lives part-time, and he becomes the quarterback at age 83 or whatever.
We were all
he is.
over that last week. I was a little bummed that it never happened.
Goodbye, Trenni. It's great to see you. Thank you so much, Trenni Casey.
Thank you very much, Trenni Casey. Trenni Casey is an anchor and reporter for NBC Sports Boston and a regular weekly Boston Public Radio contributor. Okay, up next, media maven Sue O'Connell. She's going to tell us about Donald Trump's latest pal, that would be conspiracy theorist, racist, bomb thrower, 9/11 inside job, kind of a nut, Laura Loomer, and of course, this fascinating story about where to get the cheapest Dunkin' Donuts, coffee, etc. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library, streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. Media maven Sue O'Connell is next.
College campuses are the latest front in America's culture war.
The professors are the enemy.
It is like a tinderbox, and it could ignite, especially around the election as we get closer to that.
We will not stop! We will not! I'm Kurt Carapezza from GBH News. And I'm John Marcus from the Heckinger Report.
The new season of our podcast, College Uncovered, is out now, and we're tackling the politics of college education. Listen today wherever you get your podcast.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you and Cambridge Savings Bank, where they are committed to your financial well-being, and community is at the core of everything they do. Cambridge Savings Bank. Always you. More at cambridgesavings.com, member FDIC. And Berkeley, presenting the music of Caetano Veloso and Antonio Carlos Jobim, featuring Gaia Wilmer and Jacques Mollebon at Berkeley Performance Center, September 18th. Tickets at berkeley.edu/events.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the library, streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. Before I say what we're doing tomorrow, Marjorie.
Yes.
Do you know the Heimlich maneuver or you don't?
I sort of do, yes.
I have a piece of lettuce caught in my throat. So if I go down, can you come over here and do you know what, Sue?
I do, yes, I do
Perfect.
indeed,
Do
of
you?
course.
In any
Ready
case,
to go.
we're back here tomorrow. I assume I will be back tomorrow with former Mayor Kim
I don't
Janey.
think the piece of lettuce is enough to do
It'll
it. You know?
dissolve.
Well,
in
it's maybe a
itself,
couple of pieces of lettuce. NAACP's Michael Curry and Ted Landsmark on 50 years since Boston busing. We're going to be doing our little text prompt on crypto, the latest business scam from the president, former President Trump. Joined now, though, at the BPL desk by our favorite local woman, media maven Sue O'Connell. She's co-publisher of Bay Windows and South End News, co-host with Corey Smith of NBC 10 Boston's That Issue every Sunday at 11:30, following Meet the Press. Hello, Sue O'Connell.
Good day. Thank
Good day
you.
to you,
Good day.
So Sue O'Connell, with the second assassination attempt against former President Donald Trump, there's been a lot of talk about the violent rhetoric. In our talk, he's saying there won't be a country if Kamala Harris is elected, and the Democrats have said some tough things too. I don't think they quite rise to the level of Donald Trump. But in any case, this one just knocked my socks off. The Libertarian Party of New Hampshire posted, then deleted a message endorsing Kamala Harris's assassination, saying, quote, "Anyone who murders Kamala Harris would be an American hero." And I guess they were mad at her for wanting to ban assault weapons. What'd you make of this?
Well, we should say there's an update to this,
Yes,
too.
they did.
That they put out a statement today. We're not pacifist libertarians. Goes on to say it is morally correct to use violence to stop aggression if you celebrate the so-and-so, the War for American Independence, or the assassination of past tyrants. Like Abraham Lincoln, you believe that violence is sometimes necessary to advance or protect freedom. That's these people in New Hampshire.
So listen, I have a lot of complicated thoughts about this.
Okay.
Many complicated thoughts. Number one, it's important to remember we are living in the safest period of American history in terms of, even with the attack on January 6th attack, fewer people are being lynched. Fewer people are being assaulted. The crime rate is very low. We live in a very, very safe society, number one. Number two, much of the problem that we are having with these assassination attempts and the threats of violence and all of this are because of our access to guns. We have, for many years, and our democratic cousins across the world also speak in very hyperbolic rhetoric, and they don't end up having as many assassination attempts and as much violence as we do because they don't have access to guns.
Yep.
And I think that it's clear to say that the alleged assassin this past weekend and the one before didn't fit into a political ideology. They were whack jobs that believed certain things and they acted on it. Was it the Prime Minister of Japan that was assassinated?
Yeah.
And the guy made a 3D gun in order to do it. He had to go through many steps in order to do that. So our society is both very safe and very dangerous because of our access to guns. As abhorrent as the New Hampshire Libertarian statement is, they are absolutely right that on one hand, we celebrate the American Revolution. On one hand, we celebrate the violence that brought us our country. And then on the other hand, we say, and I think we should, that we don't want to move forward with political conversation that would incite violence or celebrate violence or urge a whack job, to react to it in some way that is going to be violent. This is the contradiction that is the United States of America. We teach all of our children how great the American Revolution was, and when we kill somebody like Osama bin Laden, we celebrate it, right, as we should. I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but these are the contradictions that I'm not sure our country is sophisticated enough and smart enough to process when we're hearing this. When I'm playing sports when I was in high school and they told me to get out there and kill them, get out there and, we speak in this language all the time. Unfortunately, some people hear it and are vulnerable for one reason or another. On all sides, Representative Scalise was attacked by someone who fit into a Bernie Sanders supporter. And those people need to be reached. There needs to be mental health intervention. We need to keep guns out of their hands. I think we need to stop thinking about the people who participate in political violence, I'm using finger quotes, as people in political violence, but more like we do mass shooters who are reacting to something, have access to weapons, and then are doing it. This is irresponsible. I want to be very clear. This is incredibly irresponsible, but what they're saying in terms of what, their distance from this is not incorrect.
Okay, let me be as respectful as I can. Are you kidding? I mean, this is, and first of all, both of you seem to said something like, on both sides. Donald Trump is telling people to beat up people at his rallies and celebrating it. Donald Trump is celebrating the January 6th insurrectionists, who he calls hostages, who led to the suicides of police officers who were so damaged that particular day. Here's what J.D. Vance had to say. But the big difference between conservatives and liberals is that no one has tried to kill Kamala Harris in the last couple of months. Musk said almost the same thing. It's almost an invitation to go, there have been 2 assassination attempts on him. Go try and see what you can do to Harris. Yeah, that to the libertarian thing. And since we're not going to solve the gun problem anytime soon, unless there's a Democratic House, Democratic Senate with 60 senators, which there won't be, and a Democratic president, and we're surely not going to address the mental health crisis because it's too expensive. We don't care about these people. This is a real serious... I worry about... I'm no fan of Trump's. Everybody knows this. I worry about his health because of how much I care about democracy, and I sure as hell care about Harris's health, because we saw what happened with the Comet Ping Pong Pizza. A guy drives up because there's allegedly, according to some nuts like General Flynn and his son, there's a pedophile ring in the basement of this pizza parlor that Marjorie and I went to a couple of years ago during Trump's inauguration, and he comes with a loaded gun and is shooting up the place.
Jim,
this is a real threat.
It has been the very first violence that was because of something that Trump said happened in South Boston when those 2 guys beat an immigrant, a Mexican immigrant, I believe, who was here with a pole, with a metal pole. I think they were brothers, and they were both convicted. I'm talking from memory here, so I'm directionally correct. And they cited what Donald Trump said, right? This is what Donald Trump has been doing. He's not going to change. And again, the Republicans and other people can point to words that people say, like we're going to fight until we're going to take it to the streets until we have to. We know, like I said, 85% of us know when we hear take it to the streets, it doesn't mean go out and fight in the streets.
It's going to be wild.
It means it's, but when he says it to his followers, that's what it means. But again, this is the conflicted life of American politics right now. He's not going to turn it down. What
do you mean, turn what down?
Trump is not going to turn the rhetoric down.
Oh, obviously.
He posted right after the assassination attempt, they're 0 for 2. I mean, it's ridiculous.
I think to your point about the guns, this latest guy on the golf course seemed to have something seemed to be mad about the war in Ukraine. I mean, that he thought that Putin was a terrible guy. Maybe that had something to do with why
he voted for Trump in 2016. Yes. He said he was a Republican at one point. Then he said he was not going to vote for Trump, and he was upset about what Trump was doing in Ukraine. He doesn't fit into a political box.
But the kind of stuff that really gets people going, we're still seeing this out in Springfield, Ohio, right? Where Vance and Trump are still repeating this, people's dogs and cats being stolen to eat. And they had to, I think again today, the schools were shut down, and they're getting bomb threats and all sorts of threats out there. And kids are like in a panic, and the parents are in a panic, those kinds of things.
So this is a different type of speech to me. The language that Trump, J.D. Vance, and a whole number of other people that are using around Springfield, Ohio, is insightful lying, right? This is not, you're a socialist, or you're a capitalist, or you're a fascist, which, is indicating someone from a political position, right? I don't think necessarily calling someone a fascist is an extreme insult, nor is saying you're against democracy. That might be what you believe. But when you are demonizing people who are in this country legally, I just want to be very clear.
That's hugely important.
They are here legally. Even the migrants who are living in the center down the street, they were allowed in this country legally.
But even if they weren't here
even
legally.
If they weren't. But I mean,
right.
just
yes,
so you're lying about the status of these Haitian immigrants or migrants. They're probably migrants would be the proper term. They were practically invited to Springfield, Ohio, because the businesses couldn't hire people, the factories were closing, and they wanted to work. So they came to Springfield, Ohio. Many of them are living 3 or 4 in an apartment. That's driving up costs. There's a number of challenges to the school system, but they are both the normal stresses that happen when a lot of people, an influx of people come into a town. It can be fixed, it can be balanced, they could get some federal funds. But what J.D. Vance and Donald Trump are doing right now is inciting violence by lying, and that's not political speech, and that's an entirely different thing.
So can we talk about, speaking of Donald Trump, his traveling partner, can we talk about Laura Loomer for a couple of seconds here? Can you share with the 3 people who haven't been following this saga for the last couple weeks, what is she famous or infamous for? Give us a couple of lowlights.
Laura Loomer is a complete conspiratory whack job. She just makes up stuff. I don't really know how she got to be famous. I know that I read...
She was a Trump sycophant, and he's like a magnet for people, regardless of where they are on the issues, who idolize him.
There was a New York Times or Washington Post profile on her a few months ago, and she laid out how she was going to Mar-a-Lago every day so she could get close to him. I mean, you have to salute her. She accomplished her goal, and she is, as many people have experienced and reported, the last thing that Trump hears is what he says next. And she is filling him, along with Tulsi Gabbard, with a whole bunch of crazy conspiracy theories that are not true. And then he goes out on stage and says them, which is where they think this idea that, this wrong idea that migrants are eating cats and dogs in Ohio came from, because she was on the plane with him, he went to the debate, and then he said it on the stage.
Right, and he went to the 9/11 memorial. She accompanied him, and she is the person who was called 9/11 an inside job. Mm-hmm. She has talked about how if Kamala Harris was to get in the White House, it's going to smell like curry, and there'll be a call center or something talking about, obviously.
She's also called her a drug-using prostitute and said that, and she's probably had so many abortions, she has a damaged uterus. I mean,
so now here's an
crazy
so here's
stuff.
the kind of the look at this, which is fascinating. Donald Trump's campaign actually has real campaign managers on it right now. This is the first professional campaign staff he has had. They have lost, and he listened to them up until the first assassination attempt and up until the Republican National Convention. He actually said during his remarks at the RNC, they don't want me to say Joe Biden. They don't want me to do this. And then he just lost it and brought Corey Lewandowski back in. He's got Laura Loomer next to him. They're trying to keep her off the plane. And here's the damage. I mean, besides the damage that she is just doing and causing chaos that can have actual results for actual human beings, this election in these battleground states is going to be a battle of inches, right? Just a few votes. And by insulting Indian Americans, by insulting Eastern Americans, with these curry comments and these call center comments, she could actually lose North Carolina and Michigan for Donald Trump, even though the percentage of voters who are Indian American and Middle Eastern American, Arab American are small. That would be enough in some counties, in some areas, in some electoral districts for him to actually lose. But it's almost like he doesn't want to win because he's still
well, especially since there's some people like Lindsey Graham, Senator Graham from South Carolina, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Congresswoman from Georgia, who never criticize Trump. And they have criticized the fact that he continues to allow Loomer to be around, saying exactly what you're saying. This could cost them the election.
And what about J.D. Vance's wife, who happens to be Indian American?
Very fine point.
You don't see J.D. Vance standing up and saying...
Well, here's what he had to say. He's asked by Kristen Welker on NBC News. She's host of Meet the Press. I don't know if you're aware. You come right after that. Do you know that?
Yes, she's very nice.
So she asks Vance, about Loomer's tweet that Kamala Harris's White House, again, would smell like curry, like we just said a minute ago. And here's how indirectly Vance responds.
Do I agree with what Laura Loomer said about Kamala Harris? No, I don't. I also don't think that this is actually an issue of national import. Is Laura Loomer running for president? No. So Kamala Harris is running for president. And whether you're eating curry at your dinner table or fried chicken, things have gotten more expensive thanks to her policies.
It's a nice pivot, but I will also point out, remember when the Republicans were all twisted up because Barack Obama had a minister who might have said some things that might have been a little anti-white.
Went to my high school.
Who was it? You remember his name?
Reverend Wright.
Reverend Wright. They thought Barack Obama was not able to serve as president because he had this minister, and now they've got this traveling, it's basically a traveling circus with a bunch of clowns on the Trump plane that just land everywhere and cause this chaos.
You just said that maybe Trump doesn't want to win, and you're not the only person that said that. I mean, I'm reading more and more that he doesn't really care because he's going to just protest. If he doesn't win, that he'll be protesting, and he'll have his operatives, and every single state he can get them into, claiming that there was, shenanigans with the voting machines.
I don't disagree with. I just don't understand how he can go from a winning strategy. He's not a stupid person. I know he has no control. I know that we're concerned about how incoherent he is, but at the same time, these people know how to win elections.
Why do you say he's not a stupid person?
I think the moment that I go back and forth between thinking, oh my God, this guy is totally a dum-dum, and and then I think he's orchestrating so much of it. During the debate with Joe Biden, when Joe Biden was failing, if you go back and watch the first few minutes of it, you can see Donald Trump look at him and think, I'm going to let this happen. And it reminded me that, underestimating Donald Trump is the wrong thing to do.
So Sean Diddy Combs just got arrested. At least 5 women have accused him of some kind of sexual assault, raping them. His former girlfriend, and we've seen some of the footage of this, has accused him of beating her up, and we've seen him beat her up. What happens now?
Well, I don't think that the documents have been unsealed yet by the.
It's supposed to be this morning. I don't know if they were.
I don't think it was unsealed yet.
Okay.
We heard reports that he was arrested. He was supposed to be arrested today. He was arrested yesterday, which is curious if they were concerned whether or not there was a flight risk or something. He is charged with some very serious federal crimes
drugging
here.
Women, raping them.
Sex trafficking.
Right.
There had been for years open rumors about his parties. There are a number of comics and performers who have openly said that you don't want to go to his house because you don't know if you're ever going to come out alive if you go. So, obviously he's innocent until proven guilty, and we just have to wait to see what the charges are and if they implicate anyone else, which is also in these situations. Are there other artists that are either victims? Are there other artists or producers or people in that industry who were witnesses and didn't come forward? I think we need to buckle our seatbelts for this.
So the indictment was unsealed.
Okay.
I think while you were walking to the set here this morning, Combs is also described as the boss of a years-long criminal enterprise, this is the New York Times, that threatened and abused women, coercing them to participate against their will in drug-fueled orgies with male prostitutes. The 14-page indictment against Combs includes 3 counts of sex trafficking, racketeering, and transportation to engage in prostitution. Prosecutors said to commit these acts, Combs and his employees engaged in kidnapping, forced labor, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice.
Those are some major charges there.
54 years old, and one of the most influential artists.
Well, and businessmen. You can't. Right. This is the complicated world of these when someone's charged with these heinous crimes. He also was merchandise. He was an actor. He performed on stage in New York in the theater. He went to college and decided he was going to be a businessman and famous, and he was able to do that. And it's horrific.
So let's before you go, let's talk about something that'd be very exciting to all you Dunkin' fans around here. The way to get the cheap coffee, what's this about?
Yeah, so, for those of you who drink a lot of Dunkin' Donuts, and I'm a Dunkin' gal, you might note that when you go from place to place, the price is sometimes different. And of course, it is different because they're all franchises that are owned by their own people, and they have a range of things. And this is true about most franchises as well. But this very incredible Tufts undergraduate, Jack Burton, when your kids are in college, you're like, what are you guys doing? Are you learning anything? Are you helping people? How are you going to help people when you graduate? And Jack Burton has now decided the best way to help us is to come up with this new free tool, this app called Dunkin' Scout. And what it does is it lets you know where you can get the cheapest Dunkin' Donuts iced coffee, because the range is pretty high. There are gas apps like this. There are all sorts of apps that help you do this. But, this is definitely a tool that I'm going to be using to let us know where we can find our Dunkin' Donuts at the best price.
There's a great Globe story about it this morning. Dunkin' Scout, is that what it's called?
Yep.
Is that where you go to Dunkin' Scout, type in your address and the product that you want, and you get the best price?
And, unlike us, he went to Logan Airport, he saw how expensive the prices were, it upset him, and rather than complaining about it, he did something.
Why does he go? They said he frequents the Dunkin' at Logan Airport. I assume there's several. Why does he do that?
Maybe he travels a lot. Maybe he's going home. Maybe.
But if you're just there, you got to park. You got to get. It's expensive.
He'll write it all off in his investment. That's how you do that, Jim. You write it off as a business expense.
How proud do you think his parents are? How
very
great
proud.
is this?
I'm very proud. Absolutely.
I was telling Jamie earlier, your lovely
Jamie's our lead producer. You mean him?
Yes. I was in the car with my daughter Ruby when she was 18 once, and we were listening to a news story about an 18-year-old who had become, this is 5-6 years ago, a millionaire through cryptocurrency. And Ruby was listening, and she said, "Why aren't you a millionaire?" And I said, "He's 18. He did this when you were 14. What were you doing when you were 14?
That's
Why
right.
aren't you a
What'd she say?
She hasn't spoken to me since.
Okay.
I'm always asking her why she's not a
She's
millionaire.
a woman of principle, obviously.
Yes, clearly.
Sue O'Connell, it was wonderful to see you
thanks
as
for
always.
having me
Thank you
today.
so much.
Thank you, Sue
Thank
O'Connell. Media Maven Sue O'Connell is co-publisher of
Media
Bay
Maven.
Windows. Media Maven, what do they call her?
No, I'm just repeating. I love that.
Oh, Media Maven. I thought I called you the wrong thing.
No.
Media Maven Sue O'Connell is co-publisher of Bay Windows and South End News, co-host with Corey Smith of NBC 10's Boston at Issue, which you can see every Sunday at 11:30 right after Meet the Press, which, by the way, is on Channel 10, too. That's what they
Did you
call
mention
it.
she's a
NBC
local woman?
10. I didn't mention she's a local
She's
woman. She is
a
a
local
local woman. She
woman,
lives in
yeah.
Roxbury.
Local
Everybody
woman.
knows her, the coyotes, the people at the park, the dog. What's your dog's name, Maud?
Maud, yeah.
Yeah, the long-suffering Maud, attacked by coyotes from coast to coast. Not really. Okay, coming up after a quick break, Jim will finally explain to all of us what cryptocurrency is, how it works, and why Donald Trump is somehow involved in it now. Our texting segment of the day is next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Around the world, women logged into a portal and anonymously shared their sexual fantasies with Gillian Anderson.
Women submitted letters and were unbelievably honest and raw, and I found it extraordinary.
I'm Mary Louise Kelly. Hear my conversation with actor Gillian Anderson on the new book, Want, on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Liberty Mutual Insurance. Liberty believes progress happens when people feel secure and exists to help people embrace today and pursue tomorrow. Learn more at libertymutual.com. And Trinity Rep, presenting the political farce POTUS. 7 women in the president's inner circle must save the country after the commander-in-chief sparks a global crisis. Now playing through October 27th. Tickets at trinityrep.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Bradley. We're live at the library, streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. Back here tomorrow with former Mayor Kim Janey, the NAACP's Michael Curry, and Ted Landsmark on 50 years since Boston busing. It's time for our tech segment today, and we've asked you to help us understand cryptocurrency, because here is Donald Trump attempting to explain his new cryptocurrency family business on Twitter Spaces very recently. Here it is.
We're going to do it, and we're going to make our country greater than ever before, and you're going to be happy, and you're going to love your crypto. We have to be number one, and I think AI is really important. But I think crypto's one of those things we have to do, whether we like it or not. We have to do it. Just to add a third element, I have a lot of friends, very smart people, some very smart people, and they're believers. So it means something to me.
In other words, let me be fair. I want to be fair to Donald Trump. He obviously has no idea what crypto is. And so what we decided to do, which is why we value our listeners, we asked the listeners to text in, Marjorie, and explain crypto to our other listeners. How well did they do?
Well, we only have a couple of people that actually tried to explain it, Jim.
What
Most
happened?
of the people were suggesting that Donald Trump has no idea what he's talking about.
What'd they say?
John Ashland says he thinks Donald Trump thinks seeking asylum means people are coming from insane asylums, so no way he knows what crypto is.
It's not a bad point.
Yep, Emil in Marlborough says, I think a better term for Trump's latest scam is kleptocurrency, which fits in with its other ventures. And an anonymous texter says, Trump's crypto is easy to explain. Give me your money, all you suckers and losers.
Okay, so let me ask you something. Do you share, I want to be fair here, do you share my opinion listening to what he had to say? His response, when he was asked the question, I heard the interview, why is crypto important? He said, what I would say under the circumstances, crypto is important because crypto is important. That is exactly what he said. So you share my sense that he has no idea.
I think he probably has no idea. But his son Barron supposedly knows all about this.
He does?
Yeah, Barron apparently has 4 wallets. I don't know what that means. And Don Jr. apparently knows something about this too.
Okay. Now let me ask you.
Let me just say.
No, wait. I want you to say anything because what I want you to do, because you believe we have an educational function here. We have only 2.5 minutes. Could you take the 2.5 minutes and carefully and deliberately explain crypto to our listeners? Go ahead.
Jim, I have no idea what crypto is. I don't really understand what my 401k is doing or what the IRAs are doing, or I can't do my taxes.
So you can't do that. Is that correct?
So I'm not the person to ask you to tell anybody about crypto. No, it's over my head.
Oh.
How about you?
I, of course, know what crypto is.
Really?
Yes, crypto is a digital currency that is decentralized, encrypted, and based on blockchain technology. It is a medium of exchange that is not controlled. Excuse me, Marjorie. It is a medium of exchange that is not controlled, this way you think, by a central authority, such as a bank or a government, Marjorie. Cryptocurrencies are used as an alternative payment method or as an investment. That's just off the top of my head.
Okay, that's very good.
Thank you.
We do have a couple of people that attempted this.
What do they do?
Well, I have no idea if Cynthia from Wakefield has no idea what she's talking about, but hear what she says. Here is my crypto explanation.
Please.
Think of each as a country, which creates a new currency.
Sure.
Investors decide which country is likely to succeed and invest accordingly. This metaphor easily extends to farming, mining crypto, which each country does to produce more for investors.
Well, that really clarifies
to purchase, and she says, good luck.
You know why?
Understanding that.
Can I clarify something you said before? The reason you don't understand 401ks, I mean this respectfully, is because we don't have 401ks. We have 403bs.
Oh,
here
thank you.
That's number one. Write that down. Write that down.
Is that why I couldn't find my 401k?
Because you don't have one. That's one. 2, this will interest you because you're a climate change.
403b. I'm writing
write that
down.
403 parentheses B.
I got it.
Okay, and the second thing is, this is actually interesting. How much energy does all of the Bitcoin, I don't know if production's the right word, how much energy does all the Bitcoin production take as compared to, let's say, Greece?
Well, all I know is that Elizabeth from Rhode Island says,
What'd she say?
Of course, Trump knows nothing about his latest grift, but the most important overlooked thing to know about crypto is the ridiculous amount of energy it consumes. If we ever want to solve climate change, we should not be expanding crypto. So I guess that means it's a lot.
The same quantity of emissions as the country of Greece. What do you think of that?
I think that's
much
too much. Yeah, much too much. So, I mean, I think that maybe we shouldn't be...
You did a pretty good job.
Thank you very much. But no, Jim, I'm grateful because that's why I couldn't find my 401k, because I have a 403b. So
yeah, I think that's a good...
I'm all set
but you
now.
learned something here.
I got the tax extension, so I'm not filing
If you're at
till
the
October.
library at 2 o'clock when we have more time, Marjorie will give a fuller explanation of crypto. Right here at the... You'll do that, so stick around,
yeah,
please.
that's right. I'm not going to be doing that, Jim. But Trump, according to an anonymous texter, has a concept of crypto, like he has a concept of the health plan he's going to replace Obamacare with.
Can I just say blockchain to you, Marjorie? Okay?
Blockchain, that sounds good.
We're done.
All right, we're done. Coming up after the 1 o'clock news, going to be joined by CNN's John King. We're going to talk to him about the latest on the second.
Hey, GBH brings you coverage on a wide range of information so you can stay informed and engaged in our local community. We depend on listener contributions to keep this quality reporting going. Support your listening by pitching in at gbhnews.org.
Support for GBH comes from you and the MBTA Commuter Rail, providing public transportation service to over 170 cities and towns in Massachusetts. Just take the train. You can plan your trip at mbta.com/massbytrain. And The Lyric Stage, presenting Urinetown the Musical. This musical comedy with a dreadful title is straight-faced silliness paired with cheeky musical parodies. September 20th through October 20th at Lyric Stage Boston. LyricStage.com.
Trusted. Local. News. You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org.
Oh, that's all ahead. Hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Hip-hop mogul Sean Diddy Combs has been hit with sex trafficking and racketeering charges. The U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Damian Williams, disclosed details of an indictment unsealed today that show Combs is accused of using his influence to run a criminal enterprise for the last 16 years. Williams says Combs allegedly forced women to engage in sex acts or take part in sex parties that the defendant allegedly called freak-offs.
As alleged, when Combs didn't get his way, he was violent, and he subjected victims to physical, emotional, and verbal abuse so that they would participate in the freak-offs, and that Combs hit, kicked, threw objects at, and dragged victims.
Here's NPR's Jana Raff.
Lebanon's public health ministry directed hospitals across the country to prepare for mass casualties and warned anyone with a pager to immediately throw it away. It called for all health workers to report for duty, for people to donate blood, and for all citizens with similar devices to not use them until, quote, the situation is fully understood. Ambulances and civilian vehicles streamed into hospitals in Beirut and other cities carrying the wounded. The blasts were focused in Beirut's southern suburbs, where Hezbollah has offices, and in the south of the country, where the group has been trading cross-border attacks with Israel since the start of the war in Gaza last year. Jana Raff, NPR News, Amman.
Northeast of Springfield, Ohio, where the national immigration debate's taken hold, an Ohio sheriff has taken to Facebook to share a call to action in what some are calling voter intimidation. Here's Ideas Stream Public Media's Abigail Botar.
In a Facebook post, Portage County Sheriff Bruce Zukowski called on residents to write down the addresses of people with signs supporting Vice President Kamala Harris so they can send immigrants, which he called locusts, to their homes. The American Civil Liberties Union of Ohio's Colin Morazzi says he worries such rhetoric could lead to violence, like in Springfield, where schools and government buildings have had to close for several days due to threats after former President Donald Trump made the town a talking point.
That's Abigail Botar reporting. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 73 points at 41,548. This is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. 2 Massachusetts lawmakers have put the wheels in motion to chart a new path forward for Norwood Hospital, which was shut down and demolished after a devastating flood in 2020. Construction on a new hospital for Norwood began in late 2021 but was stopped earlier this year. Norwood Hospital is part of the Steward Hospital chain and was not involved in the company's recent bankruptcy proceedings. The State House News Service reports that State Senator Mike Rush and Representative John Rogers have filed identical bills that would ultimately see Norwood operated by UMass Memorial Health. However, a statement from UMass Memorial says that the system has no plans to take over Norwood and was not involved with the development or drafting of the bills. Excuse me. UMass Memorial Health, which describes itself as the largest healthcare system in Central Mass, is the clinical partner of UMass Chan Medical School. It's also separately involved in talks with state health officials about reimagining care at Neshoba Valley Medical Center in Ayer. Massachusetts dairy cows have been given a clean bill of health after testing negative for bird flu. The state agriculture department says Massachusetts is the only state with 100% negative results. Bird flu was first detected in dairy cows in Texas back in March. It has since spread to herds in more than a dozen states. Red Sox in Tampa Bay tonight, a 6:50 start. Another sunny day today. Temperatures in the low 80s. We are at 81 degrees outside our studios here in Brighton. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Schwab, with Schwab investing themes like artificial intelligence, renewable energy, or pet passion. Over 40 themes to invest in. Learn more at schwab.com. And the Doris Duke Foundation,
H. Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio. We're broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Going to be back here tomorrow celebrating, or looking back, I should say, on 50 years since busing began in Boston. We're going to be joined by the former mayor of Boston, Kim Janey, the NAACP's Michael Curry, and Ted Landsmark, the black lawyer in the three-piece suit. You may remember the famous photograph, iconic photograph of his being attacked with a flagpole for an American flag on Boston City Hall Plaza.
Pulitzer Prize-winning photograph by your former colleague.
Yes, Stanley Foreman, a great photographer at the Boston Herald and Channel 5.
We're now joined on Zoom by CNN's chief national correspondent, John King. John is behind 2 great reporting projects this election cycle, all over the map and the battleground. John King, good to see you.
It's good to see you, too. I was in the first busing class at the Boston Latin School.
You were?
Is that right?
First year of busing, yes. Wow, what a memory.
So what is your memory? I didn't know that, John. What is your primary memory 50 years after, John?
My primary memory is, I remember my dad saying that Judge Garrity was trying to do the right thing, but he was doing it in the wrong way. I remember that very strongly. My dad saying the goal was right, but the way they did it made a lot of people mad in both the white and the black community across Boston. And I remember how ugly it was. When I come home to Boston now, I'm so grateful. It's a better city. It's so far from a perfect city, but it is so much better now than those days. I remember people in the neighborhood who you thought were icons of the neighborhood, screaming the N-word and throwing things at buses, throwing bricks at buses. It was a horrible, horrible time. One of the defining lessons of my youth, and I'm grateful every day of my life for a mother and father who just looked us in the eye and say, that is not how we judge people. We judge people by what they do, not by how they look. I'm forever grateful.
That is John King from CNN.
Well, John, let's get back to the news out of Washington, D.C., or the news most recently out of Palm Beach, Florida. We had the second assassination attempt against Donald Trump yesterday. A lot of talk about the Secret Service being under-resourced, being not up to the job. What do we know?
Well, there's going to be yet another review, obviously one after Butler and the actual assassination attempt, meaning gunshots fired toward the former president. In this case, the alleged shooter did not fire shots, but was at the fence line, and apparently, the Secret Service saw him stick at the barrel of a rifle, a long gun, through the fence. The former president, I'm not blaming him. The former president has been told many times that his golf courses and that being out in public in golf courses is a security risk. But I do think, without a doubt, and I think President Biden tried to assure the former president in a phone call yesterday, without a doubt, the Secret Service, number one, needs more personnel and has a funding issue. There are many who also believes it has a cultural and training issues that have to be dealt with. And it's sad that you have to get to these moments of peril, these horrible incidents, to get people to focus on the challenges. And so some of this is going to be funding, some of this is going to be personnel. And one could hope, Washington's a strange town, you hear me say this all the time, but one could hope that something like this would get Democrats and Republicans in a room with really smart people who understand security and say, what do you need? What can we do to make it better tomorrow? And what do you need for us to think about this over the next 6 months, year and beyond, to make it a better, smarter agency? Because it also shows, unfortunately, we have a country on edge. We have a country on edge, and we have people who clearly have mental health issues and other grievances, and that part of it's sad.
Well, some people do have mental health issues, and some people do horrible things and do not have mental health issues. Right. The Libertarian Party of New Hampshire posted on Twitter on Sunday, anyone who murders Kamala Harris would be an American hero. J.D. Vance said the other day, the big difference between conservatives and liberals is no one has tried to kill Kamala Harris. Elon Musk made an equally irresponsible comment and then pulled it down, saying, borrowing a page from Donald Trump, I was just joking. It was a big joke. It seems to me, as horrible as these kinds of comments are at any time, in the wake of 2 attempts to kill a former president and a leading presidential candidate, they do nothing but make the situation worse. And while one would hope for round and bipartisan condemnation of these comments, even if you don't want to criticize Vance because he's running, at least Musk and the others, I'm not hearing it. Am I missing something?
No, you're not missing something. And that, sadly, I think is part of the climate we live in the social media age and the polarized age, and people who think no matter what the issue at play, no matter what the tragedy, whether it's a tragedy or some other incident, how do I take advantage of this? How do I either get attention? Some of it's just people, I call them attention-seeking missiles, who want to do it to get attention and they don't care that it's negative attention, or people who think that somehow there's political gain here. And again, I'm spitting into the wind. I've done this for a long time. That every day somebody in leadership and somebody with responsibility, that includes the three of us, we're in a public setting, we're speaking to people, there are people out there who are listening to us, there are people out there who might respect us and think oh, that was smart, I'm going to follow that point. With that comes responsibility. We're three journalists. If you're Elon Musk and you're the CEO of this giant company that has millions and millions and millions and millions of people, if you're J.D. Vance, you want to be the number 2 elected officer in the United States of America, and you are a United States Senator at the moment, you have an even higher bar, I would argue, of responsibility. But you also just have individual responsibility. Am I going to pour gasoline on the fire, or am I going to walk away from the fire? Am I going to hold my tongue, or am I going to make the fire hotter? And unfortunately, a lot of people, either for personal publicity gain or what they perceive to be political gain, are happy to throw logs on the fire, when I would argue, this is more as a citizen and a human being, that you should take a deep breath and walk away and try to calm things down, not stir them up.
You said a minute ago when you were talking about the Secret Service in response to a comment from Marjorie, they've got to decide what to do tomorrow, which Congress is not very good at, anything about tomorrow, and obviously in the future. There's 7 weeks left in this campaign. The rhetoric, the acts, I would assume this is a pretty scary time for people on both, for the Harrises, the Walzes, the Vances, and the Trumps. So what's being discussed that you're aware of, John King, about making sure that these people are as safe as one can make them for 7 weeks and beyond, but obviously 7 weeks?
I think after Butler, the conversations began, and after what happened in Florida, I think they're accelerating. We have some long-term issues here, but what can we do in the short term? How can we surge resources, whether those are intelligence and communications resources, whether they're surveillance resources, whether it's just manpower, and if you can't, obviously you can't hire 50 Secret Service agents or 100 Secret Service agents, whatever they come up with the number. You can't do that between now and the election. So can you borrow from other federal agencies? Do you have to do more with local police? These are the urgent conversations that are happening now. And I think you make a key point. I mean, every second we get closer to the election, the legitimate tension, the stress of a very competitive election is there, and then those other factors come into play. And so, this is one of the. I respect Donald Trump when he says, I want to do rallies outside. That is his right. Anyone running for president should be able to have an outdoor rally. The Secret Service has been saying, sir, we need your help. So they'll figure, each candidate will figure that out on their own. But the government has to have, in terms of the security personnel, has to have an urgent conversation about what can we do today, for the rest of today and then the rest of the campaign to make it better. And then they have a much more longer-term conversations they have to get to. I covered the White House for 10 years, and I hold that agency in the highest of respect. I will say that former agents I keep in touch with, former people who work there both in uniform at the Secret Service and as the undercover, the agents, they're officers and agents. Agents are the ones who wear the suits, and part of their job can be protecting people like the President of the United States. They do see a big cultural problem at the agency and a whole bunch of issues with staffing and with stature, but those can't be solved between now and the election. So you have to have urgent meetings first about what do we do to keep our president, our vice president, and our candidates for president and vice president, and the other people the agency protects. Sure. What do you do?
John King, we always, when we introduce you, we always talk about how you're doing this great reporting project all over the map and the battleground and talking to voters about their ideas about things. And you've talked to a lot of Trump supporters who, seem like lovely people, really, that, all around the country. But I was looking at this YouGov, and it's just one poll, and, a lot of polls make mistakes, but they talk about the spread of Trump's misinformation to people that are his supporters and how they believe a lot of things that he says. He keeps saying, he said it in the debate, and he said it many times, that that Democrats want to kill or are okay with executing babies on the delivery room table after the birth of a child. That's absolutely untrue. It's infanticide, illegal everywhere. But 43% of Trump supporters, at least in this poll, say they think that that's true, and more believe that it's true than it's not true. And in terms of his big issues on immigration and inflation, 70% say that they think millions of undocumented immigrants are arriving every month, which isn't true, and 70% believe inflation is at its highest rate ever, which is not true either. It has not been true anywhere close to what it was back in the 70s. So the point of this is that you can see where maybe, and I wonder if you're finding this, that a lot of people support him because they do believe these kind of crazy things about dogs and cats and Haitians people from Venezuela that are being let out of prisons, et cetera, et cetera. They believe it.
There are a lot of people who believe it, or at least Marjorie will say, I believe a nugget of it. Some of it must be true, right? There must be a nugget of truth to it. Yes, a lot of that. I was in Nevada last week for a piece. I'm in Georgia right now for a piece, and I interviewed a woman last night who was delightful, who said she's not sure she could vote for Kamala Harris because she was wearing earrings during the debate that have a listening device in them, and they were giving her the answers. Her staff was giving her the answers to the questions. So they did that to Joe Biden in 2020. He had a hearing aid that was actually a speaker, and they were giving him the answers. The rabbit hole is deep on a lot of these questions, and again, gets back to the previous conversation about what should people in responsibility do when there's a moment of crisis, like an attempted assassination attempt on a former president. I would argue that people in a leadership position should do it every day in what they say, and that truth should be paramount. We've known for a very long time that that's a silly sentence to say in the context of Donald Trump, because this is just a fact. This is not a partisan position, but he lies, and he lies constantly, and he lies pathologically, and he lies by design because he believes it helps him. You're absolutely right about that. I will also say, though, Marjorie, that when he talks about infanticide, when he talks about countries letting all the people out of prison and having them flood across the United States border, there are some that may help him with some people. It may some people think some of his supporters think it's funny because it drives us crazy and it drives the opposition crazy, and it's and the fact people are fact checking their time, in some ways wasting their time fact checking things that are obviously not true. It hurts him with a lot of voters. When I was in Nevada. I'll give you one example. Zoila Sanchez, a Reagan Republican, a never Trump voter, but she was just like, she's an immigrant to this country, and these immigrants are proud, and they're contributing to the economy, and they're amazing, remarkable people. They are what makes America great. And forgive my language, he pisses them off when he insults them like that. And he insults their families, he insults their heritage, he insults where they come from. So there may be, and Donald Trump wouldn't do it if he didn't see some political gain in it, but I would argue in some places, there's a price, and in some of these battleground states, they're going to be decided by 10, 15, 20, 30,000 votes. That's why I'm out on the road trying to find that balance, if you will. In Nevada, I was really struck by a number of voters who were undecided when we first met them way back in December, and last December, and we've kept in touch since. Who, when he's back in that mode again about they're eating cats and dogs in Springfield, Ohio, which everybody in Ohio says is not true, the people right there have eyes on. He pays a price for that too. Yes, he gets a benefit with a certain slice, but he pays a price, and it tells me that he has decided that he doesn't think he's going to win many swing voters. He doesn't think he's going to win many people in the middle, and so that he is trying to maximize turnout among the people who respond to that messaging, even when it is just flatly not of this galaxy false.
Well, yeah, you wrote a piece on the 11th of September, and you wrote you were talking about the people who you've been tracking in this All Over the Map project, more than 70 voters across 10 states, and you wrote, none of our voters who had settled on a candidate before Tuesday's on-stage meeting were swayed to change their minds, although several Trump supporters shared concern about his performance. So it sort of underlines what Marjorie's saying, and I guess what you're saying is if you're with him, you're with him. I mean, either CNN or the Washington Post or both said he lied, 33 times during the debate, not to mention saying some grossly offensive things. But it appears, based on your anecdotal but thorough reporting, that it doesn't really matter. If you're, as I say, if you're with him, you're with him. Is that fair?
Yes, and I'll add the but. Yes, it appears that way, that people who are locked in, and if you're a Trump voter, you've kind of invested in him, right, in the sense that even the ones who know a lot of it's not true, as I said, a lot of them say, well, he's trying to make a point. J.D. Vance even admits, he says, so even if it's not true, I'm trying to draw attention to things. I mean, think about that. Think about that. Think about the message that sends to your children. If you don't think you're getting enough attention, lie. Just lie about something until you get attention. But that's what he said. He said that to my colleague Dana Bass just the other day, that, well, maybe it's not true, but you're not spending enough time focusing on these issues, so we say these things to get attention. That's nuts. That's nuts, number one. The bad part is this, though. I will say that, again, in the states where these elections are going to be decided by so close, what is the price? All right, I'll give you two examples. Joan London is a conservative attorney, a Reagan Republican. She lives in Berks County, Pennsylvania. Her plan, because she thinks Harris is too liberal, was to write in a conservative because she can't vote for Donald Trump. She watched the debate. She watched what he said about Ukraine, and she said, conservatives do not negotiate with Putin. I'm voting for Harris. I'll come back to the Republican Party when we get rid of him, but in the meantime, I'm voting for Harris. In Nevada, just the other day, Antonio Munoz is a restaurant owner. He was undecided when we met in December. He says listening to Trump demean immigrants. He's of Mexican heritage. Listening to Trump demean immigrants and talk the way he talks and to beat down on America. He said, I'm a proud American. I love this country. The people are what make America great. And he says we have the worst president. We have the worst this. We have the worst that. He says, frankly, it just offends him so much that he's now leaning Harris. He wants to hear more about her small business plan, but you can see his trajectory. He's going that way. So he does pay a price. He does pay a price. And that's the fascinating part of these, 7 weeks from tonight, we count votes. That's the fascinating part about this final stretch. It's a tiny sliver of people who are movable, but the ones I just gave you two examples there, and I'm sure there are examples of people going, Trump's way over economic concerns or something else. But that, to me, is the big question in these final 7 weeks. And he has very smart people around him, and he's accelerating this rhetoric, which tells me they've made a calculation. They're not going to win the middle, and they're going for a high base turnout.
But on the other hand, you have Kamala Harris, who does want to get people that may be Republicans or former Trump voters who don't, as I said before the debate, didn't know enough about her. And she gets some questions, some very straightforward questions on why she changed her mind about fracking, for example, or health care, or some of the immigration policies she talked about in 2020. She didn't give straight answers, which I don't, and I'm wondering, this has become almost an epidemic among politicians. I mean, we interview politicians all the time, and some of them give you straight answers, but a lot of them don't. It's obvious they're evading the question. I'm not sure whom that helps. And I'm wondering, since you've been covering these kind of campaigns since 1988, I think, with Dukakis, is this a new thing, or has this always been true that we don't want to answer any questions, fooling nobody?
I think rare is the politician who says, I was wrong about that. Or I need to win Pennsylvania, and so I can't have that position anymore. Whatever the answer is, that's a fracking reference there. Whatever the answer is, where's the politician who looks you in the eye, who says, I was wrong. I was wrong. Or the party pressure when I was running in the primary in 2000, 99, 2000 was to go left, and I went to, and you know what, I got caught up in that wave, and I went too far left, and no, that's not who I am. They don't want to say things like that. I actually think if you look people in the eye and say, I made a mistake, think all the perfect people raise your hands, right?
Right.
That people will give you grace and respect if you're candid about it. But you hit, Marjorie, on something I think that is very important, because we have a number of voters, a couple of Nikki Haley voters, for example, in the Philadelphia suburbs, who don't want to vote for Trump, but who watch the debate and make the exact same point you said, that I don't feel she's being direct. I don't feel she's answering the questions. She ducked the questions. Why didn't she answer directly? She just went to talking points. So there's an opportunity to win some people with either more specifics about her plans or more candor about her changes. Those are the two things that come up quite a bit.
John, before you go, on an optimistic note for those who would not like to see Donald Trump return to the White House, Iowa is a pretty red state, and there was a poll just the other day from what I'm told is a respected polling source, the Des Moines Register, the major paper there, showing that unlike Joe Biden, when he left the race, who was 18 points behind Donald Trump, that Kamala Harris is within 4 points in a very red state of Donald Trump. One, do you buy it? And if you do, what does it say to you about what's going on?
Iowa.
What did I say?
Donald Trump.
Oh, I'm sorry, Iowa. What does it say?
Yeah, no, it's a very respected polling outfit, and it shows her within single digits in a state like Iowa. Remember, Barack Obama won Iowa. Back in my first campaign, Michael Dukakis won Iowa. It's one of 10 states he won. Think about how much the world has changed. Dukakis won Iowa and West Virginia among the 10 states.
Wow.
Incredible.
The world has changed a lot in 36 years. But what it tells you, Jim, is that the switch from Biden to Harris has given Democrats a lot of energy. And there, yes, Iowa is a red state. I expect Donald Trump's going to win Iowa, but I think the gaps in some of these traditional red states are going to be closer than they were in the last election because you have Democrats who are much more energized. I just finished a couple of interviews here in Atlanta. A couple of them are African-American voters who were going to vote for Biden. But they were lethargic about it or ambivalent about it. They were going to vote for Biden because they like his policies, but more because they wanted to stop Donald Trump. They are excited to vote for Vice President Harris. That energy and enthusiasm makes a difference. And so in a place like Iowa, if you know my candidate's not going to win, maybe you don't vote, maybe you skip, maybe you're working hard, you forget to do your early ballot or whatever it is. And so I do think you're going to see closer margins in some of the traditional red states because you will have a higher, if not maximized, Democratic turnout. In some of those red states, Iowa's not one of them. You also have the abortion ballot initiatives on that could bring out more voters too. I'm not saying it's going to flip a state, but it could make the margins closer. And so does that force Donald Trump to spend resources in those places? Probably not. But you got to spend a little bit more time thinking about them and triple checking places that you would have long ago forgotten, maybe. And so it adds to it. And where, forgive me for rambling, the one place it could make a difference, I'm not saying it will in Iowa, is in, the House and the Senate are on the ballot too. There are some governor races on the ballot. And so I do think if you have increased Democratic turnout in red states where Democratic turnout has maybe gone a little flat in past cycles, it could make the difference, whether it's in a statewide race for some office or in some of these contested congressional races. So she has the Democratic Party optimism, not just at the presidential level, but down ballot is much higher now than it was back in July. Trust me. That's the one constant from our travels, no matter which state we're in. I was in Iowa just several weeks ago, and Democrats were saying, it's much better here now. Not saying they were going to win, but it's much better here now. And that is the Harris effect. You're going to see higher Democratic turnout in places where it might have flatlined if they just didn't think they had a prayer.
Okay, so the question you posed to yourself is, what does it tell you about those numbers in Iowa? So the final thing for me is, what does it tell you that your Red Sox yet again are not going to make the playoffs and that your New England Patriots can't throw a downfield pass? What does that tell you, John King?
That we're back to my childhood. You mentioned busing at the start of this conversation.
Yeah.
I grew up in an age when the Red Sox and the Patriots weren't all that good. And life is a cycle, Jim. Life is a cycle. I think we're going to see Drake May in about 3 or 4 more games. The Patriots to win have to hold the other team under 14 or 17 points. That ain't really a great formula. And the Red Sox team, they played over their head. Go back to the tape of when we talked to them coming out of spring training. They were not expected to do anything, and they at least kept us engaged for a while. I think the single biggest thing the Red Sox need is to think about anybody who's getting paid to evaluate pitching, because a lot of their decisions about pitching have not worked out well. Some of them have, but they're going to need almost an entire new bullpen, and I think they might need some new metrics, new evaluation systems, maybe new personnel. I'm not available. I got an election to cover. Otherwise, I'd do it for you. But everybody needs a 60-year-old catcher.
Maybe they can get that washed-up pitcher like Chris Sale back from Atlanta. Yeah. What do you think about that?
He's going to win the Cy Young Award. I think the polite word for that, Jim, is karma.
Oh, gosh. Is he going to win the Cy Young Award?
Yes, he is. Best pitcher in the National League.
Oh, my goodness.
Hey, John King, it is wonderful to see you, and thanks for sharing your insight as always. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you, John.
Be well.
Thank you.
We've been speaking with CNN Chief National Correspondent John King. He's behind these 2 great reporting projects this election cycle all over the map.
They really are great.
And the battleground. Well, it's just fascinating because as you know, I'm not a fan of the former president, but you hear people talk with such passion about their feelings for him, and I find it amazing because they look so normal, Jim. I just don't get it. Anyway, up next, Amazon has ordered its workers back to the office 5 days a week. We're going to open the lines to ask your thoughts on a strict in-person work policy. Has this happened to you at your office? Are you worried it's going to happen soon? Is the era of WFH and hybrid offices coming to an end, much to Jim's delight? Yeah, Jim, you're such a...
I'm a stick in the mud.
You really are.
Yeah.
Call or text us at 877-301-8970. What do you want to work? 2 days in, 3 days in, 4 days in? Or you want to go in every single day? You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, comedian Hannah Gatsby continues to not quit comedy, bringing their latest stand-up show, Woof, to the Emerson Colonial Theater this Thursday. They join us to talk about what goes into making a soul-bearing comedy, and we'll find out if Gatsby thinks the world is ending or if we're just in the throes of a global anxiety attack. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Barrett Tree Service East. Their team of arborists and plant healthcare professionals provides sustainable management for the care of trees, plants, and lawns in the communities where they live and serve. Learn more at barretttreeeast.com. And The Huntington, presenting Tom Stoppard's Leopoldstadt, a stirring and epic story of love, family, and enduring bravery set in Vienna at the rise of the 20th century. September 12th through October 13th at the Huntington Theater. huntingtontheater.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marjorie, and we're live at the library, streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. We're back here tomorrow with a segment we're really looking forward to. Former Mayor Kim Janey will join us, along with the NAACP's Michael Curry and Ted Landsmark. And you know Ted through not only his wonderful work in the last 50 years, but that iconic photograph with the flagpole that won a Pulitzer Prize 50 years ago. We're going to talk about Boston busing 50 years after. So in a memo to Amazon workers this week, the CEO, Andy Jassy, wrote this: before the pandemic, it was not a given that folks could work remotely 2 days a week, and that will also be true moving forward. Our expectation is that people will be in the office outside of extenuating circumstances. So starting in January, all Amazon employees will be back in person Monday to Friday. It appears they're also cutting out some middle managers, meaning more direct reports for some, and who's against having fewer useless managers rambling on about synergy or whatever else they do in Zoom calls. What do you make of this? We have talked off and on about the merits of being in person for some lines of work. I think ours is a good example. Is returning to the office, like Amazon is mandating, the right way to proceed, or have we proven in the last several years that a hybrid setting, for most, not for all obviously, is a totally valuable and appropriate way to go? The number is 877-301-8970. What's happening in your office? What are you doing? And how do you feel if you're not at work? How would you feel about being ordered to go back? Would you stay there? Would you quit? And again, how do you feel about the hybrid world that I think roughly almost half of workers are still doing a hybrid thing? I think it's like 41 or 42%.
Yeah, I love this story from Fox Business. It says some bosses admit that their return to office mandates were all about getting people to quit.
Isn't that incredible?
I know.
They wanted people
to quit, yeah. So they figured if we're going to make them come in 5 days a week, they'll refuse, and they'll be gone because they'll quit. But okay, go ahead. Where are you on this?
I think it depends on what you do for a living. We have added, as of October, a mandated additional day has been added here at GBH. Mm-hmm. And by the way, a lot of people at GBH don't do news kinds of things. But I think in our business, it's important to be there. One of the things the Amazon guy says, which here I do have it in front of me. He says things like, it's easier for teammates to learn, model, practice, and strengthen our culture. Collaborating, brainstorming, and inventing are simpler and more effective. Teaching and learning from one another more seamless if you're together, if you're physically together. I totally subscribe to that. Okay. In some lines of work, that is critical to your advancement. In other lines of work, I think you can do it most of the time from your bedroom or your kitchen. So I think as a concept, not as a concept, as a reality, hybrid is proven to work for a lot of people. I don't think, I know this is what you were asking, I do not think people are at work, especially young workers, enough. It's how I felt after the pandemic. It's how I feel now. How do you feel?
I feel firmly 3 days a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Have Monday and Friday at home. Or if you want to go to 4 days a week, go to 4 days a week, but then give your workers an opportunity to either have Monday off or Friday
What
off.
happens on Monday and Friday if you have to go in 3 days, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday? For most workers, you have to show up because you're doing a radio show. I think they'll know if you're not there.
Yes.
Okay, what happens to the average worker if the days you have to physically go in are Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday?
That means that they will be doing less work on Monday and Friday from home.
Yeah.
Or
no work. Monday or Friday.
Or no work. But you know what? I think it's fine because I think we have this. We have such a work culture in the United States of America. I think it's fine to be able to go home and catch up, while you're working with some of your household duties, maybe throwing a load of laundry, maybe Bake some
Bake
brownies.
something.
Put the roast chicken in the refrigerator.
Someone has done that,
Maybe have a little less strain on the budget because you don't have to have your kids in after-school programs on Mondays and Fridays,
Yeah, that's
or
relaxing.
you don't have to. Well, if they're older, they can
That's
they can
true.
come home and be on their computers in their bedroom all day long, and who knows what they're doing in there.
Looking at porn,
But
right.
but and also for the traffic issue, for the commuting issue, and for all those kinds of things, I think it's a terrible idea. And
Wait, what's a terrible idea? Oh, 5 days a week.
Yeah,
Well, by the way,
5 days.
let me give you an inch here.
Yeah.
I totally agree that in almost all settings, there's no need to have to do 5 days a
The
week.
thing is everybody has to be there on the same days because there's no point in saying
In rotating, 'cause then you're not
saying,
really there with your colleagues.
You can choose Tuesday or Wednesday. Well, that doesn't work. It has to be Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Everybody's got to be there so you can bitch, you can get the gossip, you can go and meet the people you haven't
Okay,
met since
can I
the
tell you
pandemic
something?
began.
You
What?
hate when I repeat myself, so
Yes.
let me repeat myself.
Okay.
When I started doing this stuff, I was at New England Cable News. It was my first job in the news business.
Yeah.
I would say 50%, I don't know why I picked that number, a large percentage of what I learned that was good, that has made me fairly decent at this, was from sitting next to Chet Curtis, a legendary newscaster, and 15 feet away from Artie Saul, who I would argue is the best newscaster we've ever seen in our
great.
lifetimes
He
here.
was great.
And it's not because, I mean, I could contact each of them on Zoom, but that wasn't how it worked. I heard RD saying something. I yelled across a question. Why are you making a mocking face?
Because every time I think of the great late Chet Curtis, who was such a wonderful man.
What a wonderful
I remember
man.
how many times he told me that he would yell across at you when you were both on the anchor desk together, "Will you shut up?" It was like Joe.
He didn't say, "Will you shut up?" He never said, "Will you shut up?"
Yeah, he was glaring at you, saying, "When am I going to get a question in,
No, but that was not.
sideways here?"
Is that really necessary for this discussion? The point I'm trying to make is, by being in the presence, I am guessing when you were a little Cubette reporter,
absolutely.
weren't being in the presence of more senior
Absolutely.
reporters of value to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
And by the way, it's not just in news. Almost anything where you need an ounce of creativity or outside the box thinking, in my opinion, you learn most of that by being in the presence of older workers. It could be 5 years older who've been doing it.
That. It's when you're young and you don't have quite as many responsibilities with home or kids or whatever. I mean, how much fun is it to go out after work with your colleagues and trash the bosses? That's what everybody
another
wants to
good
do,
point.
right? You want to go down to the local bar, have a great time. And also, where do so many people meet their future partners is at work. And if you're sitting at home alone, it's a little bit more difficult. You have to go on to, Hedge, whatever the heck it is that all the kids do now.
Hedge, okay, whatever that is.
Hedge Clippers.
Sound like Bill Belichick. HedgeClippers.com.
Have you noticed how many people on Hedge? How many young men
nobody's
have
on Hedge.
have no shirts on?
Okay, let me tell you something.
Hinge. That's what it is.
Well, can I tell you
Hinge.
something? Hedge is not Hinge. And Hinge is...
Hinge. That's right, Hinge.
Okay.
The shirtless young men on Hinge. I
Yeah,
think-
how do you know about that?
Because I've seen people on Hinge.
Like who?
Young men. Believe me.
Well,
I am
who
not
are we
on-
talking about? What young men have you seen on Hinge?
Young women I know that flip through Hinge.
Yeah.
And a lot of young men have no shirts
Marjorie,
on.
can I tell you
I'm
something? Every
shocked.
time, I think you all know this as faithful
Mhm.
listeners, every time Marjorie says something like that and I ask, who'd you hear it from?
Yeah.
And she doesn't make eye contact, that means that she is the one flipping
Yeah,
through
well,
Hinge.
Jim,
Yeah,
please,
she's not making eye
please,
contact
please,
again.
Please.
How was that?
Andy in Florida, thank you for calling.
Andy in Florida, hi.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
We can.
Yes.
So Amazon, there's a two-part thing. Amazon is pretty rich doing what they're doing. First of all, they're a well-greased company. I worked for Amazon before the pandemic. They gave us an ultimatum before the pandemic to get rid of people because of the liability of the pandemic. And now they just want to get rid of their overflow of Amazonians because the money that they pay out to each distribution center are billions and billions of dollars. So Amazon must be losing money. That's why they're doing this.
By the way, I totally subscribe to
Yeah.
it. It's one thing if you work in a warehouse. It's another thing if you do other things at Amazon. I'm with you. There's no need to be doing an across-the-board mandate. They're doing it because they figure it's the easiest way to get rid of people they want to get rid of. So I am. And now, Andy, before you go away, how many hours would you say you've spent on a Hedge in recent times? Like, not precisely, but how many hours on Hedge? Exactly. That was the answer.
Yeah.
Well,
Hinge.
think about it and get
It's
back to
Hinge.
us. Thank you, Andy. We appreciate your call.
A lot of people say that they hate the idea that if you're working from home, you are not working, as if sitting in a cubicle, you are working sun up to sundown. And that's one of the things I think we learned during the pandemic.
What's that?
That oftentimes you do get a lot more done at home because you're not running around gossiping with your coworkers or going out.
By the way, my primary concern is not productivity. I was being semi-joking about the Mondays and Fridays, even though there is an incentive to do less. The issue to me is not productivity, because I think most of the research has shown that people are productive in hybrid settings, at least. The issue is learning. If you're young, the best way to learn is by osmosis from the person you're sitting next to or across from. I think it's a really big deal.
Listen to this.
Yeah.
This is from Lowell, who's usually working in Ipswich, Mass. However, I've been working remotely now for about 10 days. In fact, yesterday I was working hard from the nosebleed section of St. Andrew's Stadium in Birmingham, England, Birmingham City versus Wrexham. Not a bad day at work when Tom Brady shows up at the workplace with David Beckham.
Oh, I saw that picture.
I vote to continue working remotely, says Lowell, who usually works at Ipswich, Mass. Good for you,
So the guy
Lowell.
was in the UK yesterday pretending he was at work?
I think he might still be there.
That's excellent.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Good
That
for
is
you.
another thing.
What's that?
Is it has enabled people to go take vacations in exotic places, or even just someplace closer to home, like do an Airbnb thing, and I don't know, Southern Rhode Island or something like that, and pretend that you're working from home, because you are working from your Airbnb. Let's go to Kay in Duxbury. Hi, Kay.
Hello, Kay.
Hi there.
Hi.
Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say I worked from home before COVID, and I found I worked more hours than if I had gone into the office, because I'd get up in the morning, go get my cup of coffee, and I'd go right to my email.
Yeah.
So I would start working at 6:30 in the morning, and then at the end of the day, I'd want to finish up what I was doing. I didn't have a commute. Sometimes I'd end up working till 6:30, 7 o'clock. So I think there's more of a balance, that some people actually end up working more hours. I was very happy when they said I needed to go back to the office, because I found I worked a lot less.
Boy, that's really quite an interesting take.
I think that is
Kay,
true.
thank you for the call. How do you work one day at home? Most weeks, not every week.
Yes.
So how productive are you? Do
I
you
absolutely love it. You don't have to worry about getting all dressed, what you're going to wear. You don't have to worry about putting your makeup on.
So why aren't you home more then?
Because I don't think, to tell you the truth,
Yeah.
I shouldn't say this.
Well, no, then say it.
I think it's better when we're not at home, the show.
So
There you
why
go.
shouldn't you say that?
Because it then begs the question, what am I doing at home one
Well,
day?
let me ask you a question then.
I need
What are
a
you
break.
doing at home?
I need a break, Jim. I need a break. That's why. That's why my blood pressure is better when I get at home one day a week.
Because, let me just say the obvious thing, is we do something that is, our listeners
Yes.
may not agree, that is a creative thing, allegedly, and when you're surrounded by your coworkers, and we have quite a number,
Yep.
and us, that give and take, which is a lot harder to do when you're on a screen than it is when you're physically in person. There is by the way, if people want to see, can we post that photograph? There is the image that Marjorie posts on Hedge.
That's
When
right.
she's on it, which is actually a very attractive, I can see how you get a lot of response.
Yeah, things are coming out of I look like I need a hedge clip is what I look like in that
I
picture.
think that is the point they were making.
John
yes.
Beverly is disgusted with us, Jimmy. He said to shut us off because
us
he
off?
says he works 6 days a week in all kinds of weather. You know what he does?
No, he's post person.
He delivers
Mail
the
carrier.
mail,
Yeah.
and he says he doesn't want to hear about this. And obviously, there's people that do deliver the mail, and I love the people that deliver the mail, or teachers, or hairdressers, or people that wait tables, whatever. They can't. They don't have that option. We're lucky to have that option.
How about
Why don't you ever want to work at home? What's up with that?
Because, as you said a minute ago, I actually want there to be a good show. So, as opposed to some of my colleagues, Marjorie,
Although
who are willing to sacrifice
we have great
quality.
technology where you and I can see each other
We
on
do.
Zoom, and I have a wonderful little studio there,
Yeah.
and it's kind of nice, especially in lousy weather. Aaron
Yeah.
from Hopkinton, thank you for calling.
Marjorie's trying to realize she made a huge mistake.
I did. I made a huge mistake.
HR has asked for a meeting
I was
at
trying to be
2:05
honest.
with
Never
her
should
on
have done
Zoom.
that. Too
Actually,
late
they prefer
now.
you come in person, Marjorie. Go ahead.
Aaron in Hopkinton, thank you for
Hey there.
calling.
Yeah, thank you for letting me call in.
Sure.
I guess it's just like when I think about young people entering the workforce today, I hear what you're saying, but for a lot of jobs, particularly like my job is a corporate job where I'm like reviewing technical reports all day, and younger people coming in, I think that they are so used to using all these tools at this point that I don't know that in-person thing really gets it. When it comes to the sacrifice of commutes and all the other time lost, I'm just not sure that the benefit is worth the cost.
Aaron, you know what my problem? I hear you, and I respect your opinion. I didn't explain well what I'm saying. I don't just mean learning the craft or the job or the whatever. You also, I think, learn how to deal with coworkers. You learn you have also deeper social connection to coworkers. And I'll say, I've been in the workforce a long time. I would say the quality of my work, no matter what I've been doing, is better when I had good and solid relationships with the people with whom I work, as opposed to sort of casual, half-assed kind of relationships. So I guess I didn't articulate it well. I don't just mean learning how to do what you do, but learning how to be a good and productive and happy worker. Does that change your view a little or no?
No, because how many people pre-COVID or pre-remote working were bringing in noise-canceling headphones so that you didn't have to listen to the guy shouting?
That's unfortunately true.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
I had a couple of those at the Herald. Noise-canceling headphones. Listen to
Aaron,
this.
thank you for your point of view. We appreciate it.
We
Thanks.
should have brought this up already, but thank goodness one of the texters rather did. This person says, I'm a coffee badger. And that means...
Explain what that is, yeah.
This person explains, my office is 15 minutes away from home, and I don't have any of my direct coworkers in my office. So I go to the office, swipe my badge to get credit for going into the office. I stay there long enough for a nice cup of coffee, and then go back home to my puppy.
Mm-hmm. So you're checked in.
Yeah.
Now, the only reason you can't do that, obviously, you in particular, is you have to have your badge. And that you... is that...
Jim, I believe that the most recent person to have lost their badge is not I.
Maybe it was me. Maybe it was me, Marjorie. 877
it was you.
301-8970. This conversation was inspired by the decision by Amazon to direct that as of January 1st, everyone in the company comes back. Based on calls and texts here, including people who work for Amazon, there seems to be a consensus. The goal is not to have a more effective workforce, but to have a smaller workforce that people will refuse, and it will allow Jeff Bezos et al. To reduce the number of people who work for the company. That's
now, we have some people here who don't have a good experience at the office. One texter says that they're happy to skip the bigotry and misogyny in the office. Another texter says Jim has a romanticized image of the workplace. Not true for most of us. And apparently, a lot of our texters are really taking advantage of this work from home thing. Here's a texter, anonymous, of course. I'm in the UK a few times a year, Wales, actually, and I have been doing it several times during the year since the end of the pandemic. If my organization decided I need to be in weekly, I would immediately find another job.
Okay, we just got a text from someone anonymous. This is fairly interesting. I am, quote, working remotely for a company in San Francisco, which is how I can be in the audience of this live taping of Boston Public Radio at the beautiful BPL, anonymous so as not to blow my cover. Well, whoever you are welcome, and we are thrilled you are here. Again, because you're trashing me all the time saying, I don't want people to have to go to work 5 days a week unless it's absolutely critical. Hybrid is working. And if I've said this 1,000 times, but I want to say it again because it impresses me. If we had said, we collectively, workers in this country, had said to all of our bosses, let's say in February of 2020, obviously COVID, the pandemic became full-blown in March of 2020. I have an idea, Mr. or Ms. Employer. Let us work 3 days a week from home on, well, they didn't know what Zoom was then, but something like Zoom, and we'll come in 2 days a week. The employer would not just have said no, but they would have said there is zero chance that could possibly work.
That's right.
And so this radical relationship to our workplace was something, by the way, I would not have been convinced it could have worked, but it does work, right?
Did you read where even the people that run Zoom have demanded that
I know.
employees come
managers,
back?
I know.
Yeah. If they
well,
come
not
back
5 days a week, but that they spend some days a week at work, I think.
Call people back to the office at least part-time. Now listen to this. Hello, Jim and Marjorie, long-time listener, first time reaching out. My daughter and son-in-law work from home in their lovely little home with their lovely little 3-year-old. They are very productive, great parents. It's so terrific to see the experience of a family living this way right down the street from me.
Oh, that's nice. That's very nice. No, that's very nice. By the way, our staff, which has nothing better to do, has an image they created of Marjorie on her work from home day,
right.
clipping the hedges out there in Brookline.
I'm quite a good hedge clipper, actually. Just got a new pair of hedge clippers. I really like it.
Missing the
it's
point,
an
but that's
instant
okay.
gratification kind of thing.
You understand the concept? You know why they did that?
Yeah, they're making fun of me.
They are making
I get it.
Not because of hedge clipping, but because of hedge.
Of hedge, as opposed to hinge.
Yeah, exactly.
Which just goes to show my familiarity with hinge is not what you.
Oh, so you were insulted because I said you were the person you were talking about?
Yeah, I was not the person.
Marjorie, for those who don't know, she denies this. Every time we used to have, what are the guys named This Old House guys? When This Old House guys used to be on our show, this is true. Tell me how this is not true.
This is true.
Every time, by the way, we have never gotten more phone calls faster. Whenever they're on, we should have them back. Whenever they're on,
great.
there are about 6 million phone calls. Marjorie in the middle would say a texter from Methuen wants to know so-and-so. And what did we learn 15 seconds into the question?
No, it wasn't. I just had
one.
What
did we learn 15 seconds into the question?
I was masquerading. I wouldn't. I was
as a texter from Methuen.
Yeah, I was not masquerading as a texter from Methuen. There were those, what do we used to have during the blizzards where the whole side of your house
ice dams.
Ice dams. I was very concerned about ice dams. Now, Aiden, one of our producers, is absolutely right. He says young people, and that's true. I heard this from someone, someone that was 20-something and someone who was like 30-something. Young people are unhinged. You and I, Jim, are unhinged.
Who said they weren't on Hinge? You said they were on Hedge. That's why there was a dispute. You didn't say they weren't on Hinge. You said they were on Hedge. And then you said you observed young people on Hedge. And not only is it not Hedge, but it wasn't young people.
That's right, because I am not on Hedge. Although when I have seen Hinge, I have seen a lot of shirtless young men, which is unusual.
It's interesting.
I think.
Now she says she's seen it, actually.
I have seen it.
Which she denied
Hinge.
10 minutes ago. No, you did. I mean, for what it's worth. No, you did. You said I hadn't been on Hinge, and now you are.
I'm not on Hinge. Not children, young adults I know are on Hinge.
Your children.
And I just think it's odd that there are so many, I've said this 5 times.
Say it again. Say it a few more times.
Anonymous texter. I think there's probably an enormous generation gap on this topic. Show me a Gen Z or millennial who agrees with going back in the office. Boomers and Gen X see the value in a little thing called human contact. We were raised pre-iPhones and even computers in some cases. The compromise has to be in the hybrid model. There's something lost in one cases. And that's it.
There's something lost in most cases if you're 100% work from home or 100% in the office. I totally agree with that.
That's right. That's why my compromise is perfect. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And everybody can have a long weekend without a commute.
And obviously, if you're responsible, Monday and Friday on Hedge. That's the perfect balance, I think, for... Let's see if we can beat this to death.
I work 1 day a week.
In a hedge. In a hedge. Okay, we're really losing control of the show. It's Marjorie's fault, as always. Let's go to Connor in Framingham. You're on Boston Public Radio. We're talking about Amazon ordering all of their workers to come back to work 5 days a week come January, and then Marjorie, as always, got off topic. Go ahead, Connor. Hello.
Hi, Connor.
Hello, unhinged people. I'm a hinged millennial.
Thank you. In a hinged world, yes. Yeah.
I've been working professionally for a decade now, and I actually was able to work remotely as an intern. That's how hip I was 10 years ago.
How come? What do you do? How did that happen?
I'm in software, so that basically could be anywhere in the world and do my job.
Okay.
But despite that, my company last year instituted a 3-day RTO, much to the chagrin of a lot of my peers. But despite what the texter or whoever had most recently said, as a millennial, I actually don't mind being in the office. But millennials, just like anybody, hate rules. So all I'll say on the topic, really, that my point was that we're happy to be there. We just don't want the man telling us what to do. I know I sound like such a hippie saying that.
No. Can I tell you something, Connor? When we started having these conversations, which we have roughly quarterly since the beginning of the pandemic, I'm so glad you called because you reminded me. Do you know what the most common complaint from people who didn't want to go back to the office was? The contempt they had for their incompetent and in some cases abusive supervisors. And they said they didn't want to return to that anymore. And that was not one caller or one texter. There was a lot of people. So it's not dissimilar from what you're saying. So you don't sound like a crazy hippie. You sound like a sane hippie. Connor, thank you very much for the call. Now, I am of the opinion, I believe Jared does his excellent show. You may be aware it airs after us every day,
Yes.
2 to 3.
Yes.
I believe he does it in person 5 days a week. You do, don't you?
I do it in person.
I never thought to ask you, I know you got to be here Friday because you're at the library. Why do you never work from home Monday to Thursday?
Because I feel like there's a better collaboration when we're all in the office together. We also all happen to have a lot of fun together.
Exactly.
Which is a great incentive.
Okay, but do you have a home studio?
It's funny that you should ask that because I was just talking about this today with the winter approaching. But no, I don't have a home studio.
Well, see, there you go.
No.
Well, then it's a little hard to work from home.
It's a little hard to work from home. And let me tell you,
Marjorie and I do.
the home studio is very impressive.
It's very
You know, when people come over to my house, they say, "What's that?" I said, "Oh, that's my home studio. I'm on the radio." Everyone is always very impressed
great.
by that, Jim.
Now, one last
I showed
question.
them my microphone. I
that's
showed them my
nice.
GBH
Okay,
little Comrex
good.
box.
Your little logo, fine. Okay, so Jared, before we get to whatever it is you're doing on your show there, when you were younger, let's say 10 years ago, on an average week, how much time did you spend on Hedge?
I was just asking, what is it? Oh, you're talking about Hinge and Hedge?
No, she's talking about Hedge, apparently.
You're talking about Hedge, but you mean Hinge?
I meant Hinge, and I called it Hedge.
Yeah.
And everyone has gotten quite a
So
kick out
answer
of it.
anything you want. You can do Hedge, Hinge, whatever.
I have spent no time on Hedge and no time on Hinge.
Perfect. Okay, that's a good answer. What are you doing on that show
What
of
is
yours?
Hinge?
Who
Hinge is a
cares?
dating website where a lot of young men
Without
get on
shirts.
without shirts.
Marjorie knows a
Did I
lot
say
about this,
Hinge
apparently.
that time or Hedge?
No, it doesn't matter. I mean, that's the only thing she knows about it. Young men without shirts.
So we established what Hinge is. What's Hedge?
Do you remember when we
Hedge
slept
was my
on the Russian tall
misspeaking.
ship?
Yet
and there were
again.
all those young sailors
Yeah,
without
that's right.
shirts. Do you remember that? This is real,
I
by
don't
the
know why
way.
you're bringing this up, Jim.
Okay, so what you call it there? Jared, what are you doing today at 2 o'clock?
So
That's a true story, by the way.
We're starting with comedian Hannah Gatsby, who is weighing in on the state of the world as we experience it right now.
Yeah.
Their new show is called Woof, as in, it's a tough world. And then we're talking about Library Lion. I don't know if you're there at the BPL studio,
We are.
if you've seen a lion roaming around
No.
there.
No.
But there has been a puppet created by Jim Henson, his labs, and for this new play. We'll talk about that. And then The Secret Boston, an unusual guide to all the things we pass every day in the city and have no idea about. Like, did you know you can take a tour of the sewage plant on Deer Island?
No, I didn't, and I don't plan to go there, actually. So
It's the perfect
But thank you for
Hinge
sharing that with
first
me.
date.
It's the perfect Hinge first date.
Jared, we'll be
Absolutely.
listening. It sounds like an
Okay.
excellent show.
I got
See
it
you
wrong,
later.
Jared. I meant to say
Okay.
Hinge, and I
Goodbye.
said Hedge.
Say goodbye to him.
I've been ridiculed ever since.
Goodbye, Jared.
All
Nice
right.
to see you. Good
Thank
luck
you,
with
Jared.
the show. What's
And
up?
Thank you all for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. Thanks to the folks that came down to the Boston Public Library. You can keep up with us 24/7 by way of our podcast or check out our TikTok page at Boston Public Radio. Tomorrow, we're going to be back here at the Boston Public Library with GBH Executive Arts Editor Jared Bowen. You just heard us talking to him. Harvard National Security expert Juliet Kahn. I can't wait to talk with her about the Secret Service. The
Oh, yeah.
ACLU of Massachusetts, Carol Rose, a Boston busing segment with former Mayor Kim Janey, the NAACP's Michael Curry, who are both busts themselves and have stories to tell. And Ted Lansmark, he is the black attorney who was assaulted with an American flagpole during the busing crisis, captured now in an iconic photograph by the great photographer, Pulitzer Prize winner Stanley Foreman. I want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, even though they've made fun of me nonstop, Aidan
Okay.
Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, our engineer.